Okay, good. Everybody else set?
Good to go.
Okay. The June 2nd meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen is about to be convened. As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of coronavirus, all town buildings are closed to the public. Therefore, this meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Mike Stone, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen. I'll begin by seeking a motion to conduct this meeting via remote participation and to take a roll call for quorum purposes. So do I have a meeting? So Tracy is making a motion that we conduct a meeting via remote participation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Norm?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. In addition, Town Administrator Daniel Knappich is present in this meeting. And our Finance Director, Ed Centeo, is also present. Kyle Pedicini will act as the host for this meeting. The meeting is now open. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 23rd, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that can gather in one place, this meeting of the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen is now conducted via remote participation. No person in attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching via virtual meeting or the live meeting via the town's YouTube channel. We will also post a recording of this meeting on the Town of Yarmouth website as soon as we're able to do so. Please be patient as we work to overcome any technological challenges with the virtual meeting. To reduce confusion during the meeting, all participants of the virtual meeting are muted by the host. As participants are called upon to speak, they will be unmuted. Members of the public attending or viewing this meeting virtually will be able to use the raise hand button to identify themselves to the chair when called upon. The host will then unmute your audio. If you are dialed into the phone number provided, you can press *9 on your phone to indicate that you would like to speak. Please wait for the chairman to recognize you before speaking. In addition, public comments may be submitted via email to publiccomment@yarmouth.ma.us. This account will be monitored during the meeting by the host and provided to the chairman as applicable. If you are called upon to speak during the meeting, please consider the following guidelines. Do not use speakerphone. Do not use Bluetooth devices. Mute all background noises and clearly state your name each and every time prior to speaking. All votes must be roll call votes. After a motion is made and there is a second, the chair will take the roll call vote. All motions, decisions, documents, and letters will be verbally read into the record. If it appears the meeting cannot or should not proceed, then the host will recommend that the chair request to continue the hearing to a later date and time and/or until the public meeting can resume normally. We always begin our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, so I will do so now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm, for that.
Yeah, Norm had his flag, for those who couldn't see, visible in the background. Thank you, Norm.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, we will start with public comment, which is the 6 o'clock item. Do we have anybody that wishes to be heard on public comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have a Ruth Driscoll. You are now unmuted.
Ruth Driscoll. Ruth, can you hear me?
I think you need to unmute her.
Kyle?
Yeah, I've allowed her to talk and asked her to unmute. She has to unmute herself.
Press *6.
Do we lose her?
She's still on. She just hasn't unmuted herself. We can come back to her.
Okay. Is anyone else?
We have Commissioner Joe Glynn.
Joe, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Go ahead.
Great. I first want to recognize Maureen Toohey Bedford in the beautiful Memorial Day ceremony. It was good to see you guys there. That was my first day out since the St. Patrick's Day parade. So it was good to see people, and it was a wonderful ceremony, and Maureen, as always, did a great job. I had heard on social media, and I was a bit confused, that the Grays Beach Boardwalk was closed. And I had listened to previous meetings, and I remember Selectman Tolley's comment on the boardwalk. So that was in the back of my mind. I don't know if I missed something after that or something else changed, but I'm wondering what the story was that, but that just dovetails into what other lifting of restrictions the town is going to do. As you guys know, I've commended you in the past because I think that you, the Board of Selectmen of Yarmouth, are representing the town very well and uniquely in the whole state of Massachusetts. And I think we send a great message out when you guys take the lead on what we're going to do individually as a town for our citizens, and of course as our guests look at us in the future, whether it's golf. You know, if we were a hair short of golf being you being the first place to open up, or us being the first place to open up, and that's a message that can go around the world. Say, yeah, Yarmouth is open for golf, and even if they don't come now, they know it for the future. But that also goes for beaches and the decisions you made about the parking and the 12-foot blankets and all the other things that you said we as a town are going to not have to enforce because we know that the law says that they can't make us enforce, and we can't use resources. They can't force us to use town resources to enforce any of these rules, and we dictate our own destiny. So that goes into your later discussion about the businesses and the restaurants. I think we're putting our people in a position now that if we say nothing, I think that you guys should stay the course and do as you have been doing. I think you get tremendous support from the town to say we're Yarmouth and we're going to make a decision on what we think is best for our town and in all of these things. But I think we put our businesses in a position, if we say nothing, or I should say, if you, the selectmen, say nothing on a particular issue in regards to the opening of anything in any of the guidelines as opposed to orders. So, I just first would like to know the answer about the Grays Beach Boardwalk, but just keep that in mind when you're talking about the restaurants and the other issues later on. But again, I commend you guys for all that you're doing. Keep up the great work, and have a great day.
Thank you, Joe. We have Ruth back, or is she left.
In response to Joe,
Yeah,
he
go
should
ahead.
know that there, in response to Joe, he should know that there is a specific agenda item. There was a letter of recommendation from our staff with regard to the parks and the boardwalk and a number of other public facilities, and that's up for discussion this evening.
Okay, thank you, Norm. Anyone else? Okay,
Yeah, so for public comment, we'll try to get Ruth back. Ruth Driscoll, you're permitted to talk.
Kyle, can you tell if she's on a telephone or on a computer?
I think I can't tell. I think she's on the computer though, because typically telephone, they come up with the number.
Okay.
And it shows a telephone like in Eric's case.
So, Ruth, if you can hear us, if you go to the bottom left-hand part of your screen, you'll see a microphone. If you hit that, you probably have a red X through it. If you hit it, you'll unmute yourself.
We also have one other comment. We can try one more time on Ruth, but we have a phone call ending in 3378. You are
Hello?
now live.
Hello, this is Vita Morris.
hello, Vita.
Oh, good. I'm glad you can hear me. I was just thinking, these negotiations with the unions that you've been having in executive sessions, do they have anything to do with increases in salaries and/or benefits and that kind of thing? Because if that's the case, it is unconscionable under these circumstances for them to try and squeeze the town to get any kind of increases for their members. I just can't believe that they would be doing something like that at this point. And aren't there any decent members left who could tell them to cut it out? This is, I can't believe that that's what's going on, if that's the case. And I hope that it isn't, but and if it is, then I hope that they cease and desist at the very least to pause and wait to see how everything finally resolves itself. Now, the other thing I wanted to comment about is what's with the restaurant owners and motel owners? Obviously, the WUS in Boston isn't going to be doing anything anytime soon. They have, and they're not getting any help from anything like the Chamber of Commerce or the elected officials here from the Cape or anything like that. They need to start doing it on their own and let their voices be heard. Why are they so quiet? Other people can't do it for them. They just have to finally stand up and do it for themselves, I think. And I hope they will. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vita. We did get a lengthy email and public comment from Michael Sarrazin about golf. It's pretty detailed. I don't know if the other board members have seen it, but he says that he's 35 years old and a member of Yarmouth Golf, and has been on the Yarmouth Golf Tournament Committee for 7 years, the last for as chairman, and that this is his 7th year running the Cape Cod Junior Golf Association, putting on golf tournaments for 14 to 16-year-old kids on the Cape for each summer. And he sent this information to the Golf Enterprise Committee last summer about allocation of tee times amongst the Cape Cod municipal golf courses, which was compiled pre-COVID-19, but he says is relevant to the future because there's a lot of talk going around about members planning to leave the Yarmouth courses. He says he has his full-time job as an administrative assistant at Cranberry Valley Golf Course, and one of his responsibilities is to set up the Chelsea tee sheets for the entire year. And that each course starts with a blank calendar and has to go day to day to set up the parameters of the tee sheet. This includes setting what times are for members, non-members, leagues, tournaments, maintenance, and starter times. He says that he knows the Chelsea system inside and out. He talks about the town not receiving money from the general fund. I guess what he's basically getting at is he's aware that it's run as an enterprise fund. And he understands that because of that, there has to be a certain amount of tee times for greens fee players. But then says, why should anyone pay $1,150 for a membership if you only give them the tee times that are left unsold 2 days prior? What happens in 2 to 3 years when Bass River is closed for a year or two and all the members have only one course to compete against green fee players? This thing is pretty lengthy. I think he questions the way that the reservations are made for greens fee players versus town members. And he says Yarmouth is the only municipal course on the Cape that doesn't let members view the entire tee sheet online. Members can only view an alpha report of who is playing, and even that was shut down for a week. All those settings to view tee sheets are a click of a button in the back end of Chelsea's POS. And then he goes on to show various, I guess, ways that other towns in golf, like Cranberry Valley, Barnstable, Dennis, the Captain's Golf Course in Yarmouth, how they, try to work out this arrangement. And I guess what he's saying is there's better ways to do it. And the members, I'll go skip to there's a lot of detail in here. I mean, he really goes on and he gives a lot of, and I'm not, belittling his letter, but it would take quite a while to read it all point by point. But his conclusion is, I fully support Yarmouth Golf becoming self-sustaining. Selling tee times, booking outings, hotel groups are all a huge part of that revenue. It is for all our courses, yet all the others still block out times for their members first. So what he's saying is these other golf courses block out time for their members first, and then I guess they sell the greens fees. He says, I supported the increase to $1,150, but you have to give the members some set tee times. We know you have to sell times, so why hide the tee sheet? Let members see what times were sold and what times are left available to members. What is the policy for setting up the tee times each day for in-season and off-season? That's basically it. And he gives a lot of detail as to what other courses are doing and how the public can actually, I guess his point is, see what's going on. They're more transparent systems, and that our current system can be much improved upon. That's the basic thrust of the letter. We have anybody else, Kyle?
We'll try one more time. Ruth is on.
Ruth, can you hear me?
Ruth's also welcome to send whatever comments you wanted to make to the public comment email,
Sure.
and I can read it as it comes in.
Okay, why don't you do that and let me know if she does, and if she comes in, if she can unglitch herself, even if we're on another matter, we'll give her that opportunity, because this is obviously a technological glitch. All right, let's move on to these, 7:15 septage, yeah. Excuse me, the 6:15 public hearing of the fiscal 21 budget presentation. Yeah, is this the one that we're having the public hearing on?
Yeah, so I gave to you
This is,
the advertisement.
that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
This is,
This is
okay.
it.
This is written in, you have to have perfect eyesight to read this.
You want me to read it for you?
Yeah, go ahead, read it.
All right. It is pretty small, ridiculously small.
Ridiculously small, it is.
Legal notice, Town of Yarmouth, Budget and Capital Improvement Plan hearing. The Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on the Budget and Capital Improvement Plan on June 2nd, 2020 in the hearing room of Yarmouth Town Hall beginning at 6 p.m. The proposed FY21 budget and capital improvement plan are on the Capital Budget Committee page of the town website at www.yarmouth.ma.us or at the town administrator's office from 8:30 to 4:30 p.m.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Yep. And I believe Chairman of the Finance Committee is going to make the presentation potentially for capital budget.
Okay,
He should be in the lobby waiting to get in, Kyle, and also there might be a couple of members of capital budget waiting to get in.
Okay, if they could raise their hands, I can let you know who we're needing to let in.
Joanne Crowley should be in the audience waiting to come in.
All right, Joanne is allowed to talk.
I think I'm in. Can you hear me?
yes, you're in, Joanne.
And Ken Moody was going to join us as well.
Okay,
So what's in the packet tonight for presentation, and Kyle will run that, is the original capital budget committee recommendations, because I think it's important. This is what was approved. And if our financial situation determines in the future to be better, we could certainly go back and address the capital items. I think, Kyle, you got to be on the capital budget committee presentation.
sorry, Kyle.
Dan, this is Ken. You should be able to hear me now, can't you?
We can hear you now, Ken.
Perfect. Hope you can't see me, but
Can't see you, but that's okay.
You're showing up on the screen as Donna.
yeah, well, she's got a degree in finance, so I use her credentials to fool people.
I figured it was one of those power behind the throne things,
So Joanne, are you going to handle the overview of the capital budget?
And I talked this morning.
Okay.
Joanne knows a lot more about it, but I think we can go through the high level pieces of both finance and capital. And for detail stuff, Joanne is the expert. So, because I can give you the high level, the capital budget. Here's the reason what we're doing today. First of all, $3,034,000 of the capital allocations have been zeroed out for 2021. And that included all of the levy items, which are $1,052,000, and then it's roadways and another smaller item. It was also about $1.5 million for the total of $3 million. The capital items that made the cut are basically revenue generated items such as ambulance receipts that fund some of the fire department. But essentially, my understanding of the purpose of going over capital right now is to identify the items that originally were proposed so that everybody, the public, can have an idea of should the financial condition change after subsequent to the beginning of the fiscal year, and contingent with a fall meeting, a town meeting, these items would be, on the docket, so to speak. But as of right now, those levy items have been taken out of the budget. Does that resonate? Those are the items that the Capital Budget Committee spends the most time on, as you know. And there was a request of about $4.2 million from departments, and $1.5 million was recommended by the Capital Budget Committee. And again, I'll restate, those were all eliminated from the budget. So the question is, the issue is the public should be able to at least know what was originally on. And secondly, does the Board of Selectmen have any questions about what I've just talked about? Joanne, do you want to add anything?
Yes, Kyle, can you move up to slide 5?
Yeah, all we have is the picture of the town.
So for the board's consideration, you've seen this before. This is our presentation from February 25th. So none of this has changed since then. And this was our list of recommendations by department that comprise the 1.5 million that essentially is in suspension and on hold, as we understand it, until such time as funding may become available during the year. The committee would be best served, I think, if as funding becomes available, the town, I believe, and or the departments would be in the best position to prioritize this list. This list was our priority list that met all of our criteria, but certainly picking and choosing and ordering this list of projects would be best served and handled by the town, the administrator and staff as we go forward. The other reduction that was made was a standing appropriation that's been in the town warrant for several years now. And that has to do with roadway paving and wastewater, mainly sewers, not the big wastewater. That also, which also equaled 1.5 million, has also been held in abeyance. The rest of the projects, as Ken mentioned, are ones that are essentially self-funded. Recycling, enterprise funds, the ambulance fund, et cetera. So that's the summary of what we had proposed and what's out there for future consideration.
Okay, so just to summarize, I guess, so people will understand it, in the best of all possible worlds, that capital, which would come out of the tax levy, that just over $1.5 million, would include those items that are shown on the slide, which says CBC FY21 recommendations, funding from the CIP tax levy. And those monies are not going to go for these purposes because we're expecting a significant drop off in revenues, and we're planning for that. I believe that the estimates that Rich was putting forth were about a 33% decline in revenue and at least a 10% decline in state aid, and maybe more likely a 20% decline in state aid, which puts us in a very difficult budget position. But if things improve from that point, these are the recommendations that you would make. These would be possible places where these funds could be directed, correct?
That is correct. I would say, though, that given the time that we're in right now, there may very well be items that are more important to the town that simply didn't exist in February that are now related to the COVID-19 experience we're all going through, that may in fact become more of a priority and become part of a capital improvement list that we would never have seen.
Okay. Does anybody from the board have any questions or comments on what we've heard so far?
I have a comment.
Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, I'm struggling with this whole thing because these two capital lists, the $1.5 million that is on the screen at this point, plus the roadway items that were what, $1.1 million roughly, were from the levy. So what we're doing is we're saying because funds that have that are not part of the levy are declining, we're taking levy items out of the budget. So where that puts us is I think in a really difficult spot because it's not likely that the only way to increase the tax levy is to raise taxes. And the increase in revenues is highly unlikely at this point in terms of the other revenues, and those revenues were used principally to fund salary increases, those increases in other revenues. I'm not talking about tax levy dollars. I'm talking about the other town revenues. So what we're doing here is switching. We're switching levy items that for raises given to people over time, and for staff and additions to staff. And I think the taxpayers need to know and understand the real issue that's going on here, and the choices that are being made, because what we're not doing anything in our to reduce our compensation, and as a matter of fact, we're not funding some of our compensation. We threw out a significant amount of OPEB funding, which is part of payroll, and we're not funding that. And then and in addition, we're taking all these items out of the levy. I'm having a very difficult time dealing with the choices that we are making at this point. Because again, we have not asked for any kind of staff reductions. We have not asked for any kind of wage adjustments, and those are also items that are part of the levy, but have previously been paid for by other tax revenues. So I just I'm not sure that most of our taxpayers will understand what is really happening here until 3 years down the road, when in order to put our capital plans back in action, we have to increase taxes by a significant amount.
Okay, anyone else?
Mike, I have a question. I think Norm's point's valid. I'd like to hear from either Dan or Ed what the plan is in the future to reinstitute this. I think we went over this once before and they were saying as receipts come in, they'd switch it. But, you know, we went back and forth about the vote and the will of the people and making sure we're carrying that through. And if this is a short-term thing and there's a plan to get it back in the levy without raising taxes, I think that that's something that we should hear.
Well,
Okay,
yeah, I would say that time will tell if people's buying patterns go back to pre-COVID-19 habits. It'll take some time to heal the economy. So that's one caveat. The other one is CARES Act funding to offset the losses in municipal budgets is under consideration at the Congress. There's a potential that some level of funding like it was done in 2009 with ERA will come around. And if that's the case, that would inject some sum of cash probably over the course of 2 fiscal years into our budget, but nobody can predict what that's going to look like for sure. And most importantly, like I said, I think because of our location, you know, people will always want to come to the Cape for vacations, and it's just how much time is it going to take to get meals and hotel and motel and short-term rental receipts up to pre-COVID levels? I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you that, but I would bet money on that sometime in the future, where maybe within 3 years, we'll be on a pretty good trajectory towards that. And if, and this is a big if this whole COVID-19 situation gets behind us, and I'm not really sure that's going to happen.
Hello, Selectman Post. I also want to just bring up some history. Prior to 2008, all of our capital was either paid for via free cash or borrowing. With a change of administration, what happened was that the capital became part of the levy, the $1.5 million.
Correct.
We also had a shock that happened with having to pay some school assessments. We lost the $1.5 million in levy, and then we built it back up again. So this is not without precedent that we have lost the ability to fund at the $1.5 million within the levy. And then we work to build it up as the local receipts, as Administrator Knappich indicated, start to come back.
I don't know that that's entirely true. I think that a lot of these items and the capital plan in itself were put into the levy when levy capacity became available because of debt drop-off. And we had a lot of discussions about that over a period of time, how we were going to be able to absorb some of these items into the regular levy capacity because debt was dropping off, and we ended up having the ability to do that. And I, you know, so I.
That was part of the equation for building up the $1.5 million in levy capacity, losing it, and then building it back up again. However, I think this cause is not a large assessment. This cause is a result of a reduction in revenues. And, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, that gets built up, or, you know, we're going to have to make some, you know, difficult decisions again in November and possibly next May.
Ed, do you have anything to add to what Dan said in response to Tracy's concern about what is the specific plan to return to the way these things were funded prior to this COVID-19 crisis?
Certainly, there are a variety of different ways this might occur. You know, we might get some one-time money from some federal or state sources, but what we want is reoccurring revenues. But I think those one-time dollars could buy us enough time for those folks that are spending money on those local receipts items to return to spending that money. So what has to happen is there has to be a lot of discipline. Once the local receipts start to increase, we can't then look to increase programs or do other things. We have to ensure that all of that local receipts growth goes back to capital spending.
And have there been any, I know Rich was involved in a lot of this before he left, but was there any consensus as to what kind of a time frame? And I realize you can't pinpoint it with 100% accuracy, but what reasonable time frame we could project in terms of recovery?
Well, I think what we built into this particular budget was an ability to reassess at different points in time. No, I don't know that there's a time frame. There's a hope, but we have, excuse me, we have the ability to reassess in November when we have a town meeting. Depending on where we are with that reassessment, we could actually potentially fund some of these high priority items or other high priority items that may evolve. We then have a check in place in May. And I think what we need to do is build enough cushion to say, hey, let's get through this immediate crisis and reassess at different points in time. As you know, we have that revenue trend report that you all see on a monthly basis. We need to watch that, and when that funding returns, then we can do things. And again, it has to be a dedicated effort to say this is going to capital and not to anything else.
In terms of the look back in November, other than revenues, what else is going to be under scrutiny?
Expenses, obviously. Hopefully we'll have a town meeting on the 22nd, but we need to look at that very closely, and then we need to look at our other funding sources as well. But you know, it's the revenue, both from tax levy. We're down in our tax levy collections right now, considerably, because we've delayed the collection date, the due date to 6/1. We're going to see in the next couple of days where we are there, but we've delayed the penalty date until 6/30. So we may have significant reductions in not only our local receipts, but also our real estate receipts. So what this budget is designed to do, and there is no perfect budget. You know, there's always going to be something that somebody wants to put in or somebody wants to take out. But what this does is give us 4 months to see where the economy goes, to see if there's any rebound in the COVID numbers or whether they can remain stable and all of our businesses can open up. Unfortunately for us, this comes at the worst time. This comes during the summer months when a lot of this money is actually made for both our citizens, our businesses, and the town of Yarmouth. So, again, we need to, buy some time to get to a point where we can reassess again, and we can look very closely at some of the spending items that Selectman Holcomb has mentioned, so that, if we have to do some permanent structural types of changes to a budget, we can make those structural changes.
And let me ask a question. What is 1% of our payroll cost?
Okay. So 1% of around 22 million.
Okay, so it's about, 1% of 22 million is what, 220,000?
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So we'd have to have in order to put back half of the capital budget, the two capital budget items. So we'd be talking, putting back $1.3 million. We'd have to have a 6% reduction in payroll in order to accomplish that.
In addition, you might have to do more because you also have unemployment costs that you'll have to pay. And you'll have to pay out accrued time. So
Well, that's if there was a layoff. But if we asked for
Yep.
salary adjustments,
yep, that is a possibility. We have one union contract, I believe, that's not settled at this point in time. I guess we could try to reopen a contract. That's extremely difficult. But, you know, as we go forward and start looking at contracts, yes, you know, those types of things can become a consideration.
well, I guess, you know, it may be too premature at this stage to do that, given not knowing where we're going to be in the fall. But my suspicion is that the fall isn't going to bring any good news. And based on the way things are going and the very slow pace that our state government is taking with regard to changes in getting business back going again, you know, it's going to be very difficult to see any significant improvement.
Mark, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I think they've all been answered.
Eric?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Dan, is there anything else you want to add?
No, actually, I think Ken might still have a little bit left to add, and then we
Right.
can, if you want to just go into any further on the budget, but as a matter of form, at some point, we're going to need to take a vote to recommend the articles that are financial articles within the warrant.
Yeah, from a finance committee standpoint, I have a couple of things I guess I technically have to put on the agenda or put on in the meeting. Is right, Dan? I should go over. We voted a budget, and I've got two very, very brief slides that explain what our rationale was and any little in between the lines type issues. So I don't know if you want to put something up, Dan, or I can just
Yeah,
quickly
I think Kyle, it should appear, Kyle, after capital budgets presentation.
Yeah, the budget forms themselves, I'm not going to go over. It's about 80 pages of department by department budget. I will tell you, I'll just give you the 30-second background. The finance committee met with you in early February, and we had preliminary budget discussions as well as some strategic issues. Over the period of time, we did vote on every department budget. Those were subsequently changed. And you can see in the budget package, for example, the way they read is it'll show FY19, it'll show FY20, it'll show what was originally proposed in FY21. And then the final column or one of the columns will show the reduction. And for example, one of the higher level ones is if you look at public safety and you look at police and fire over time, you'll see clearly a minus 50,000 in each. So that at least gives you the technical, how the budget reports work. So that was our document.
Can somebody show us what he's?
Yeah, nobody's running it. It's very long. It's what you would see in the budget book if you ever have the budget book.
Well, I just don't think we're having a discussion in order of the way the packet's.
No, I know, it would be nice.
No, there should be, there was 2 slides, Ken, that you put together.
I put 2 slides together at the end, right? But I think what Tracy's talking about is legitimate because I explained That, you can go back one. Yeah, I was trying to explain just the format, again, for people that haven't been familiar with this process. You know, the format. You got to go back, you got to go down. It says Finance Committee, it looks different. It's not it's small print. Yeah, back, I think. Yeah, go back one more. Okay, so for the official record, the Finance Committee, and I should give you a little color behind it, feels the same way the Select Board does, that this is a very, very difficult, uncomfortable process that is promulgated only because of the crisis we're facing from COVID-19. Nobody is pleased with having to do some of these things, but when we took a final vote, the vote came out, or the budget is, as you will see in your packet, $80,019,208. That is cut as of today by $56,363 due to a reduction in our assessment for the DY school education, but you know, it's still, you know, around $80 million. So that is our official information to the public of what the recommendation is. The next slide will tell you just a little commentary, because I think it's important. First of all, the Finance Committee recognizes, and Ed sort of pointed it out, that this is going to be a moving target beginning very shortly. And the Finance Committee is going to commit to having a standing agenda item to review monthly revenue and expense. I'm sure the Select Board will also, but we'll stay on top of any changes, also recognizing there's lag times in terms of receipts, et cetera. Finance Committee will formally address ongoing revenue and expenses with a report after 3 months, which I would expect at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen. You may want to have an update somewhere in between the beginning of FY21 and any kind of town meeting, so that you have some sort of interim information feedback from the Finance Committee, sort of a state of the where are we after 3 months. It could be good, it could be bad, it could be anything. The Finance Committee also was fairly vocal about trying to identify a couple things that were cut, and everybody's going to have some, and I'm aware of some. This was the Finance Committee felt very strongly, and it's a $70,000 item, but felt that should trends be favorable, that we put on the table that priority should be given to rescinding cuts to health services, particularly the food pantry. That was a very uncomfortable situation for the Finance Committee and for the board to discuss. So we wanted to sort of memorialize that comment. Also, the Finance Committee felt pretty strongly that the Board of Assessors be approached to closely review and consider the tax overlay reserve as a potential source of funds. That decision has to be made by the Board of Assessors, and the committee felt that they should be asked to address that for their consideration. And also, and it's sort of preaching to the choir here, also supports the recommendations that the cuts and deferrals in particular be geared towards looking at capital expenditures. We too recognized that where the capital money comes from, and that cutting all of it out, even though a deferral was something that again should be memorialized as a real concern should funds become available. Dan, that's really the only technical presentation that we had. It validates the numbers, and it puts on the record some of our future monitoring as well as priority concerns going forward.
Yes, and actually, Ken, just to follow up on that, I had requested from Bruce Murphy a summary of some of the recent years appropriations of the Human Services Grant, and that is now should be in everybody's inbox. if you
Okay.
want to take a look at it. So you get some background as it relates to where those human services grants have gone over the last couple of years.
Okay. So that's sort of short and sweet. And like I say, there's 100 pages of material here. I don't think you want to go over all of them, but we're certainly prepared to talk about any specific items that we worked on.
All right, because this is a public hearing, is there anyone out in the public that wishes to comment or
Chairman,
ask a question?
Just to finish off on this one, there's also Ken Jenks and Carol Woodbury should be in the audience too, because this is also the time to present for the first time the DY budget to the board.
Okay, are they on?
They should be. Yep, they are. Apparently they are.
Okay. Carol, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you
Oh.
fine. Ken, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you both clearly. So which one of you would like to proceed?
I think Ken's going to start.
Okay, good.
And I'll say in advance, in a good way, about half of these slides are outdated because last evening the school committee voted to lower the assessment to lower the budget and therefore lower the assessment to the two communities. But the first set of the slides certainly walk people through, give some insight into our population and how we would propose to address the population, our goals, the overall, what our budget increase looked like based on the DESE categories. And we'll go from there. And firstly, if any other school committee here, I want to draw attention to, we had multiple committee members coming to attend. I know Mr. Tierney was called away for an emergency based upon his work. And hopefully that turns out okay for everyone. And if not, I'll double check with the superintendent. Any other comments? And if not, I'll begin in walking through talking about our school system and some of the demographics involved.
No, I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, that first slide, if you look through, and again, about the first 5 or 6 slides are, and again, operating, and then after that, the numbers change. So I'll walk you through the numbers by hand. If you look at the slide with the foundation enrollment, the first step is, as we develop a budget, always, how many students do you have? And as we all know, there's been an extended process where both communities and the schools worked through to come up with a way of doing this that everyone felt was reasonable and fair. And the end result, after multiple years of work by multiple people from multiple communities, was using that FY21, we'll use the 5-year rolling average. Some of you remember the old regional agreement average, and we'd have a chart, and it would be very different percentages compared to foundation enrollment. And foundation enrollment is the best way to go, if you will. I'll argue without getting into great detail, because it counts all the students responsible for. At the end of the day, we ended up going into this budget season looking at that rolling average, 33.7894%. That would be Dennis's portion, and Yarmouth would be the 66.2106. And so, in a sense, that's the beginning of our process. How many students do you have? Well, 3,338 that we're responsible for, and how would we divide that up between our towns? And so that was the first slide that gives some insight into developing our budget. Who do we serve in that budget? And that has some insight into the population and our budget choices. If you look at that selected population slide, it gives some insight into our student body, English first language and English language learners, our students with IEPs, learning plans, 19.3%, and students who are identified as economically disadvantaged, and then students who the state would say are high needs, meaning there's one or more risk factors. They're not destiny by any stretch of the imagination, but they're factors that schools should take into account. And that's 58% of our student body in Dennis Yarmouth.
Is there some reason we're not seeing these on the screen?
I don't have the slideshow that I can access.
No, it has to be done on their end. Well, if you don't mind, I'll say a couple things about that same slide that Ken had. I think one of the things that you all know, we've talked many years with you folks about these things, but our budget is really a direct reflection of the programs and services that are required to meet the educational needs of our students. And so that's why this selected population slide is rather important. Some things are required, of course, by state and federal law, and other things that we sort of feel they're required because they keep us regionally competitive. And as you know, we do live in the school choice mecca of the state, and people have lots of opportunity to make choices about where their children go to school. So it's important that we stay regionally competitive. This next slide is really just demographic data, just another view of the students that we serve. One of the things that I wanted to just share with you this evening, and if you've been listening to our school committee meetings, you might be rather aware of what's going on in terms of our community, both of our communities while the COVID-19 situation is occurring. Since March 17th, we've served 115,000 meals to students in our two communities. We have, mostly it's the drive-through. People show up between 11 and 1 at our schools and pick up lunch and breakfast for their children. We also have some of our families who either don't have a car or don't have a car at the time because maybe somebody in their household does have to go to work. So they don't have it at the time between 11 and 1. So we do have some delivery going on. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, there are 58 stops for delivery. And on Tuesday and Thursday, 32 stops for delivery. And that's a total of 90 households. Our delivery person is delivering 2,772 meals a week. The numbers, of course, have been increasing significantly over time, as we know that families are in a really, many people in our community are in difficult situations. But overall, when school was in session, 4 of our schools qualify for the Universal Free Breakfast Program, which means that any child in that school can have a free breakfast every day. And one of our schools, the Emmy Small School, qualifies for both free lunch and free breakfast because of the number of students that qualify for free and reduced price meals. So I just wanted to add a little bit of that color commentary while we were waiting for the slides. And so I think we're ready for the next slide, whoever's running that. Kyle? Ken?
Yes. And so our budgetary goals, what are you trying to accomplish with the money you spend, whatever that amount would be? Improve student achievement. Invariably, that's always our goal, even when we're happy with the results we're getting. You never want to settle and say, oh, I guess we're done. And, you know, to be practical, that's not a realistic situation for anybody to be in. So we're always looking to improve that student achievement. Secondarily, maintain and enhance programs. And maintain is, in a sense, keep what you have that's working. I never want to imply if it's not effective, you should maintain it, and enhance. And for us, the enhancement is often focused on, okay, are we taking care of everybody? Are there enough honors and AP courses and programs and options for students so that students looking for that kind of academic challenge and rigor are able to find it? Are you also supporting the students, if you will, who are having a more standard experience, but are looking for job internships and all kinds of hands-on things, as well as some academic background? Yes, you know, we have an incredible internship program, probably the best in Southeastern Mass, if not a larger area. And Are you having specialized supports for your high needs population? Do you have enough of those EL teachers, the English language learner teachers, to maintain the programs because of an increasingly large population of students who need those supports? Do we have enough special ed services to provide all the supports for students in their individual educational plans? And are you keeping those average class sizes manageable? Pretty typical to see 22 to 24 students in our classes in many of the lower grades. The upper level is a little different depending on the class and the sequencing. But overall, what we're after there is, are we providing enough support for all the students with the kinds of programs we need? And it's covered up by the pictures. And again, I'm not sure of the formatting. Our third budgetary goal is always the 3 R's: the retain, the recruit, and return. We know choice and charter has been a real challenge, and we're always working on that. And whenever there's long struggles or parents feel you don't offer the programs, whether it's academic or support or co-curricular, such as arts or music and the sports after-hour programs, people might leave. And so part of the retention is maintaining those programs. Recruiting, we always encourage choice in because that helps counterbalance some of our choice out. And returning, which quite frankly is the most challenging because people who leave the district often leave and they don't come back. A couple quick pieces on the pictures. Students at the intergenerational model UN, student in the middle at I believe a law day contest. And finally, the bottom picture is Credit for Life. Where do we have success? Are we finding that our students on the next slide, are they getting to, in a sense, what people think of after college, after high school? I would argue in general, yes. You'll notice our percentages of the district compared to the state. We don't have the 2020 plans yet because usually the state doesn't publish them, and we don't use our internal pieces until after graduation. And you can see there, though, 83.9% of our students, that's where they've ended up. We also have students going to the military and other options as well. Compared to the state, we do well, and draw your attention to the 2-year public college. The long and the short of it, I think many of our families have realized that 4 Cs is an untapped gem down the street. It's a very cost-effective way to get a lot of educational courses under one's belt, whether you end up with that 2-year associates or move forward. So in a sense, that's what we're trying to accomplish with the budget. And now to get a little bit to the numbers. March 9th, the school committee adopts that budget, 64,834,171. You'll notice the 150,000 of the excess and deficiency. And because everything after March 9th, March 13th, when we went home on that Friday, everything in a sense closed down from a school point of view for an extended period of time. There's been a period of some adjustment and a review. And as of yesterday, the school committee last night adopted a slightly lower budget, and the assessments and the assessment worksheets were sent to both communities today. And so actually the current operating school committee budget is actually a budget of 64,749,044. And that has, of course, lowered the assessments to both towns in proportion to that ratio. On the next slide, and unfortunately, I did not get a chance to update all of these and make them reflect the 64,749,044. So how did you spend this money? Because it's a significant amount of money. And you can see the 3-year trend there by the Department of Ed codes. Administration is pretty much what you think it might consist of. Superintendent, assistant superintendent, everybody, including the clerical folks working at central offices, principals, and so on. And so you can see that's what we spent in FY21, the proposed budget. Instruction, that is the biggest driver. You see that $2 million increase. And it's, again, what you might think of as instruction. Anybody who's involved in teaching, teachers, counselors, social workers, they're built into that piece. The instruction also includes the teaching assistants and the folks who do those kinds of roles. And that's the core of our budget every year. We're a people business. That's what drives our budget. You see that increase. That increase represents contracts of a 2.25% increase with the educator bargaining unit, a 2% increase with the assistants, their bargaining unit. And there was also a restructuring of the teaching assistants. And there's hence the 2.25, which was a very modest, reasonable increase compared to everybody, that area increases. We're worried about retaining staff. We've realized for years, we're right at that piece of the bubble where if you don't watch salaries, you're going to lose qualified people or not be able to attract qualified people. And so therefore, that's what drove the largest increase in this budget. 3,000 pupil services, that's fundamentally buses in sports and a lot of other smaller activities. And you can see those areas. In general, the two areas that jump out for significant increases are the 2,000 and then that payment to other schools. We'll get down to that in a second. Maintenance, a couple $100,000 increase, and it's about repairing equipment and adjusting for their staff, paying for their staff. Like everyone, we benefited from the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group rates not going up significantly. The increase you see there is more about our MIA insurance and facilities and some of the other insurances we're carrying. Non-public transportation, the law requires us to transport non-public students in our district. And so there was a slight increase there. Equipment and capital, again, a modest increase. The debt service has, you can see it's going down by the nature of the payoffs. And the payment for the other school, that significant increase represents about equally split choice and charter costing more because we're still working there on that piece. And also some of the costs to send students to specialized private schools to provide services that are required by educational plans. And if I could ask now, in a sense, to jump to the second to the last slide, because those other internal slides were not updated to reflect last night's vote by the school committee. You see that last slide, the 64, 834, 171. But actually now, again, to give you those numbers, at least verbally, based on the reductions last evening, in the end, the dentist assessment is 17,846,077. And Yarmouth, that reduction from the 35,930, 816, with the most recent reduction brings it to $35,874,453. And again, still sizable amounts of money. No illusions there about that. And yet I would argue those are the, it's an expensive business because of the changes. Just give me 1 second. Because of the changes in the regional agreement and the most recent budget adjustment by the committee, bringing that budget for Yarmouth down, it ended up coming down to about $284,400 below a 2.5% increase. And I know 2.5 is not a fixed requirement, yet it's the first time in quite some time, I think it's fair to say, that the district was well below a 2.5% increase on the Yarmouth side of the budget. And so if you look at last year compared to this year, I think we brought in a reasonable budget. The committee looked at it. We also know it was hard to consider, should we reduce specialized supports? That increasingly we have students that need those supports, whether it's English language learners, special education students. And of course, we all know now, with the knowledge gaps that we can anticipate growing out of staying at home because of the pandemic, and not being sure what the Department of Ed in the end is going to say for the fall. Do we have mixed models? What do we have? I think we're in a good position with this budget to maintain our programs, to be able to maneuver and do whatever is required in the fall and still provide the level of services many of our students, particularly some of our more vulnerable population, would need. And compared to, I think, last year to this year's total assessment, it's an under $600,000 increase, about $576,000. And so I guess from the technical side, that's the information for our budget. That's where we ended up. And certainly questions.
Thank you, Ken. Norm, do you have any questions?
Just a couple. As I recall from your earlier slide, the E&D contribution to the budget was about
150, yes.
Was what, about 150,000?
Yes.
I watched the discussion last evening with regard to the change in the budget and the background for that with the Dennis Finance Committee. And I wondered why there was not a decision to just reduce the amount of E&D rather than to reduce the total budget.
I certainly won't speak for the committee. If someone from the committee would wish to speak, if not, I'll talk a little bit about, I think, the strategy we followed. Well, first of all, if you don't mind, I'll hold for if someone from the committee wanted to say something.
I don't know who's here. It could be, I don't know,
Yeah.
Phil Morris might be here, Brian Sullivan, Andrea St. Germain. I'm not sure because we can't see who's present.
The only one I see is Phil.
Morris is here.
Mhm. And certainly I'll speak if I just
We see
want to be in the right lane.
Morris on the screen. Phil, can you hear me?
Yes, and can you hear me? You can't see me, but I can see you. You're looking better these days.
Yeah, it's a glorified game of peekaboo, I guess. Would you like to be heard at this point?
I would like to add from our discussion of last night, we did discuss that possibility that Norm raised, but because of the unknowns that are still taking place for funding and medical and health expenses, we felt it was better to at least leave that in until it shakes out from the state's financial support and new programs, that they're not so much new programs as they're looking to keep alive the progress that the state and the local schools have made. So that is the concern in these financial times. Is obviously all we got to do is look out the window and see no automobiles traveling as they used to. So we know money is going to be tight for this coming fiscal year, and we haven't had a complete shakedown over the summer. Will take place. What the financial pictures for state revenues are going to shake out to be. So that was our thinking last night as we made tinkered with these changes. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil.
And if I might add, as we all imagine, we know, we're hearing, we all have on the municipal side, you have the same meetings, similar meetings you go to about people talking, what is Chapter 70 going to end up like? What are those pieces? What are the revenues? And I think, in a sense, again, the approach has been on the school side, a bit of a watchful waiting. Let's see how that's all going to pan out before we make any of those adjustments. And I don't want to ever suggest, many of us, and I know on the town side, we're happy to hear FY20 was going to end with us all receiving what we anticipated, not to have a crisis there. In some respects, as we go into FY21, Right. The bigger the reserve in some respects, the better, as we know, depending on how the state handles it. We've all heard, is it 10%? Is it a 20% Chapter 70 piece? Or is it really much more likely to be, what did you get last year, you get this year? And so again, I think that was driving some of the thinking of, for now, let's stay with that. We all know over the next month or perhaps next couple months, there may be other significant adjustments coming down the pike.
I can't
So
believe
I think
I addressed the selectmen.
I'm not sure I got an answer to my question. I didn't see any discussion during the meeting of the school committee with regard to use to changing the amount of E&D funding. And as a matter of fact, the only discussion that occurred was with regard to the possibility of future increases in budget allocations mid-year, which I thought would be a disaster, and probably illegal. But in any case, I'm still wondering, as opposed to a $150,000 E&D allocation, why wouldn't you simply reduce that allocation by the same amount of the reduction in the line item of the budget, so that your allocation to the towns would remain the same and your E&D wouldn't get eaten up? And I would think the E&D would be particularly important with all the uncertainties in the next years and year at this point.
I think you raise a good point, Mr. Holcomb, but I think that part of what precipitated the change was that we discovered an error. And so in order to clean up that error, we just felt that it was necessary to reduce the budget. I really think that's the way it went. And
yes,
as far as thinking about E&D, you're right. I'm not sure that really just factored into the whole equation for us. It was just, there was an error, something was double counted, we pulled it out, that brought it down. And so therefore, we felt we did the right thing.
This is Phil Morris speaking. One side bit that did not come out last night, but is known when we work on the budget, we cannot line item directly into E&D. It has to be from savings or other sources of unexpected revenues. So if we are going to face a shortfall, or we can't just, we can put money directly into stabilization based on the town's approval of our request a couple of years ago, but not so in E&D. It's not equivalent to free cash that way. Thanks.
Have any questions, Mark?
Was there any discussion at all? I might have missed this, but did anybody explain the $2 million increase in instruction?
in terms of, if I can jump in again, the collective bargaining increases, and while the 2% or it's 2.25%, there was a restructuring on the assistant side. You also have to look at about a third of the teaching staff, and there's some 344, 45 teachers, are also youngish or newer to the scale. And so in the first step, first 12 years, usually you get a percentage increase, but you also often move educationally, and you get a step in what's called a column. So for approximately a third of the educational staff, you're probably seeing, to be quite candid, about a $4,000 to $5,000 increase. But it's really about the personnel costs in the increases. Yes.
So one of the things that happens is that when some teachers first graduate from college, they have a bachelor's degree, but within 5 years, the state of Massachusetts requires them to have a master's degree. And as they move over, what Ken was talking about for the columns is like, if you get your bachelor's plus now you have 15 credits, you get to move over. And then when you finally have your master's, you get to move over. So in a way, people are being their pay increases with more educational credit in addition to time served, if you will, in terms of years and steps.
Thank you.
Tracy, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, I was not able to watch last night's meeting, so I don't know just what I've heard tonight. And so there was an $84,000 reduction, and it was something that was counted twice, but there was no real reduction to any programs or services. Is that a correct assumption?
What I can explain, Tracy, is
Yes.
oh, I'm sorry, Ken.
Sure.
We, as you know, we received Title I funds from the federal government. And each year over the last several years, we've seen a reduction in that amount of money. So in the budget, sometimes we try to anticipate, okay, if we have to reduce those services from Title I, do we put another position in the budget just to hold us over before that reduction? Because those services are for, as Ken mentioned earlier, our more vulnerable students with reading and math. So, and our youngest students. So that was put in, and the person's name was put into the budget. And then there should have been a counter piece where there was a subtraction showing that this person was not really supposed to be in the budget. So it should have been, okay, the person's salary was in there, but then there was a subtraction because it was from the person was actually being paid out of Title I. It wasn't that. So it was double counting a person.
Okay. So what you're saying is, based on the current forecast with the COVID and the state financial situation, the projections are not good, and you're not going to make any adjustments to your budget until later on. Is that what I'm hearing as well?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just curious. I know the foundation number is 3,338. What are the actual number? And you don't have to get this to me now. We've always it's been good for us to look at for, I guess, future planning, the actual number of people in the seats now, how that has changed over the course of maybe a few years. Additionally, with the FTEs.
Sure.
I see both the choice and the charter and tuition out is about a $500,000.
Yes.
Well, all right. So, in Dennis, their shortfall, they're planning on funding out of their levy and not in an override scenario. Is that correct?
That is our understanding. I certainly would never want to speak for another community.
Okay.
As a Dennis voter, there's nothing requiring me to do an override for those kind of programs.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. I appreciate your work. And I just have to say, I know Carol talked about it at the beginning, but the lunch program and the feeding of our population has been a wonderful thing that the district has done. And I just can't thank you enough. I know it goes well beyond just the children. It speaks to the families, and I know you've helped at the senior center, and it just, these are times where we all come together, and I think it's been an amazing program. So thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Eric?
I don't really have any questions on the budget, but as the father of a DY senior, I would like to thank everyone involved for everything that they've done to try and make this strange time as celebratory for your seniors as you can. I feel terribly for all of the seniors. They're certainly missing out on a lot, and you've done some nice things to make them feel special and recognized. And on behalf of, I don't want to speak for all parents, but I think that I can say that we probably all appreciate what you've done to make this transition as painless for them as possible. So thank you for that.
The credit goes to
Yes.
Principal Funk and his team. They've done some pretty amazing work, and I think we're going to be all very proud of the graduation that will happen, I believe, on the 25th of July. It was felt very strongly that our students and our families wanted as much of the traditional graduation as we could get, and so it required us to wait, but I think it will be worth the wait. So thank you for that, Holly.
I appreciate that, and we look forward to a definitive conclusion to the senior year.
Yes, yes.
It really never ends, Eric.
No, it's just the beginning of a new trek.
There you go. Do we have anybody in the public that's trying to get in?
We have Commissioner Joe Glenn would like to speak.
Okay, let's hear from Joe Glenn, since this is a public hearing. Joe?
Hi, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I don't know if I need to go through you or if I can ask the superintendent or Mr. Jenks a question, but it regarded the administration slide. I saw a difference from the 19 to 20. There was a decrease and then an increase in 21. So I don't know if Mr. Jenks can see that or Ryan can pull up that slide, but if not, then he can get to it.
You know what category it was in, Joe?
I think it was the second or third slide. Mr. Jenks probably knows, I think.
Yep. I'm trying to pull them up so I can take a look at it.
It's on page 8 of the presentation.
Right. To be candid, I want to get back to you with a specific response because there was some positional moving that works to the budget categories, but I want to give you a very concrete answer, and I can respond to that. Just, I don't have that here with me right now.
No, I understand it. I just wanted actually
Yes.
the selectmen to see that and see if that was something that just stuck out to me, that it was, 19 and then it was 17 and then it was 18.
Yeah.
And my other question, and this can probably go later to the town issues, but are we going to realize any savings from transportation, from the fact that we didn't have any sports, either immediately or in the future, bus transportation for the school, for the regular school and obviously for the,
yes,
the private school transportation?
Yes, we will see some very good savings on those areas, as you might imagine. With the bus companies, the state set up a series of not requirements, but guidelines, and said as long as you follow the procedures, you will still be reimbursed this spring, as long as the bus companies, in a sense, were kept on retainer. So all the schools were kind of doing the similar things. We'll get our reimbursements that were predicted. We're seeing substantial savings in the contracts, of course, because of insurance and fuel and bus runs not made. Those things will help us. We're also seeing savings, of course, in the substitute teaching line. So yes, there are some reasonably strong savings in those areas. And that will certainly stand us in good stead as we go forward.
Traditionally, though, we don't get our full transportation budget. And I just assume with cutbacks and things that we won't. But you're saying that there's a special provision that you've been promised that we finally will get the full transportation budget?
It's not
this spring. Yeah,
100% reimbursement, but
right.
Whatever was promised for percentage was promised for this particular year.
Okay, I see.
And the other piece.
And energy cost, and this goes that I'll forward it to the selectmen on the general budget also. Is the town saving any energy cost and other cost because of, buildings being shut down and the like. So, but it is the district saving energy, and is that reflected in the budgets?
Well, we're saving this spring, so we'll have a better saving, we'll finish the year in a better position than we might have if we were operating under normal procedures. Yes.
Right, and that's what I meant to say too. As far as the town, we had a fairly mild winter, so even before the crisis, we saved on snow removal and like. But I would assume that we saved the district on energy also, just regardless of the COVID crisis. So thank you very much for answering all those questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else? Yeah, is that you, Vita?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to go back to union contracts. Those are apparently subject to renegotiation, as was demonstrated by Bob Sanborn at Mid-Cape Tech. He apparently sat down with the bus company and at the very beginning of this process and was able to, bring down any of the costs that that would have been, paid out, considerably down as far as I understand. So there's an example that I think everybody else needs to follow. I didn't quite get from the discussion with Ken and Mrs. Woodbury. They seem to be talking more about the reimbursement from the state rather than renegotiating with the bus companies per se on the contract that they had. So I'm not sure whether they also did that. But that also, I would think, would apply to the municipal, unions. Under these conditions, the unions have to, understand that, their contracts are subject to renegotiation, I would think.
There was a renegotiation with our bus company, just as similar to Superintendent Sanborn.
Okay, so that's okay. So all right. So I hope now that the municipal government will pick up on that and see if they can do something about that. Thank you.
I guess I would like to just, reminder to everyone who might be listening that when we have savings, those savings will end up in E&D, and it will get certified during the FY21 school year. So those savings will be really available for FY22, which is a good thing because we're hearing that things could be equally as bad. So.
Anyone else, Kyle? Any emails? No? Okay. Does anybody from the board have any further questions or comments? Anybody, does Carol or Ken have anything further?
I don't think we have anything further. Thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it and hope to see you at town meeting.
Okay.
And graduation.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
We have anything further on the budget hearing component, Dan?
I don't have anything from the public or any comments.
Okay. All right, I guess we'll move on to the next item then.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close, yep.
Oh, yeah, okay. Tracy, you making that motion?
Yes, sir.
We have a second?
Second.
Have a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
Norm?
Aye.
I vote aye as well. Public hearing is closed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is something that Ed Centio might have more information on. It's related to a needed repair at the septic facility, and I understand that there was some language some years ago generated by the memo that I gave to you that allows for emergency repairs to be done and notify the board in advance of those.
Ed? Is Ed with us?
Hi, this is Ed Centio. Yes, as part of our putting away $300,000 into an emergency or a repair fund or reserve fund for the septic facility, a request was made by one board member that any spending from that fund be discussed with the Board of Selectmen before we do anything as it relates to utilizing those dollars. And the genesis of actually putting this money away is that this is an enterprise fund. If this facility is shut down and has to wait for a town meeting to actually utilize funds to create or do a repair so that it can continue to operate, it could be closed and not available to the public. So with the board's wisdom, they voted to actually have this fund. And this is basically a notice that we are going to use some of those dollars to actually continue to operate the septic facility through the end of June 30th.
The estimated cost is 40,000.
No, our cost, I think we want to shift about $150,000. The $40,000 was for an equipment repair, and the other amount of money is related to an inability for us to source a location to transport our solid waste out of our facility. So we had to switch to a different methodology to handle that waste. And that costs significantly more money. The facility is still going to generate retained earnings towards its goal of ensuring that it can continue to do its capital spending from that instead of having to borrow as it had to do in the past, and also to try to set aside funds in case we have to do a decommissioning of this 30-year-old plant. One of our neighbors that had to decommission their plant had to go back to its taxpayers for millions of dollars in order to do the decommissioning, which was a surprise, and we don't want to have those types of surprises.
Talked about a different method of disposing of the waste, and that is going to result in what, about $110,000?
Yeah, so there's a way that.
Is that an expense item, or is that related to capital?
It's an expense item, so you can't set up a capital fund essentially for enterprise funds. So what we have is set up is a reserve fund. That's the only legal way you can actually have money to be able to use for these types of emergencies. So that can be used for capital or expenses. Again, if what we would have done if we had a town meeting that was scheduled in May is we would take retained earnings and fix this budget situation. Without having that mechanism, we would actually have to shut the plant down because we wouldn't have expense authority to keep it going. And then our haulers would have to take the waste off Cape and would have to charge our citizens more money because of the additional expense of having to do that type of transportation.
So is this increased amount of money, this roughly 110,000, going to be a recurring expense?
No, we've actually, through putting in place a new contract, have been able to go back to utilizing both methods, the dewatered sludge and the thickened sludge method. The thickened sludge method costs significantly more than the dewatered sludge because, as you'll see, the dewatered sludge, we're transporting 21% water as opposed to the thickened sludge method, where we're transporting 95% water. So we have secured a contract where we can take the waste to upstate New York. And the long-term solution, as we've talked about for too long, is you know, the anaerobic digester, where we would have that capability on site, and that would actually decrease our cost overall. So, you know, this is not a permanent change.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Yeah, I think you asked the question about whether this 110,000 is an operating expense. You know, and I guess I question the same thing. It doesn't sound to me like it's a capital expenditure at all. And I liken the situation to the golf course from year to year. The golf course from year to year has profits or it has losses. If it has retained earnings, then and it has a loss for the year as a result of, it could be extraordinary circumstances, could be they have lousy weather for a month, they have lightning storms, they have this, they have that, they end up with a loss. The loss is a reduction in retained earnings. It's not a capital item.
Yeah. So
a loss on the golf course is not a capital item.
We're not losing money. This facility, as it has since we re-engineered it, is making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we'll make over the expenses.
And even more to the point then, why can't we simply absorb the $110,000 in the operating profits that are being made?
We could do that if we had a town meeting. So the way government works is you can't exceed your authority to spend more money without a town meeting vote. So the reason why we put this fund in place is we thought we would have a capital issue. The other way we can do this is we're actually spending capital to maintain this particular property, and we can actually spend and pay for that capital in addition to the chiller, and we would come to the same spot. But we just wanted to tell you why it happened. But we put capital into the yearly operation to keep the plant going so that we don't encounter the situation where we had to spend $2.5 million without a clear way to actually pay for it. We were scheduled at that point in time to lose $380,000 a year in the facility. We went through stem to stern through that facility. We reorganized how that facility was operated, and we returned it, or allowed it to be profitable. This has not, in the last 5 years, had any issues with raising revenues. And yes, if this were a real business or a regular business, we could just spend out of the expense line, but we don't have the authority through government to allow us to do that.
Well, this is an enterprise fund, is it not?
It is, but it's still governed like a municipality. If we could just raise the expense level in this fund, it would be great, and we wouldn't even be coming before you. But that's not; those are the rules that are given to us by the Department of Revenue. It doesn't operate like a business.
I guess I fail to understand the difference between the situation that I cited with regard to the golf course and the situation here.
The golf course loses money. This does not.
Okay, so let's get back to again, this operating expense to me does not meet the definition of a capital item, and this is one of the reasons specifically that we wanted to have these items come through the select board.
Yeah.
is to make sure that operating expenses did not get charged to the capital reserve.
So there is a line within the septic facility budget, $200,000 for capital improvements so that we can maintain the plant. What we can do is we can go kind of do an end around. We can pay the $40,000 in capital. We can pay for as much of that capital line from this budget, and then we would have enough room to keep the plant going. We could do it that way if you like. But I
How
just
do these
wanted to explain why we
how do
didn't.
how do these expenses get classified as capital items?
Based on this expenditure size.
I don't think that's the definition of a capital item.
It's
The
also the
expenditure
length,
size is
in the length of its depreciation life, yes.
right, but
I can bring up the septic.
you indicate in your explanation, because the outlet for dewatered sludge was cut off, expenses
Okay,
have dramatically increased using a secondary option, which is to transport thickened sludge. So transportation expense increase. That's not a capital item.
okay. Can I go for a mulligan for the way I explained what actually happened? So if this did not happen, this situation did not happen, then the capital that we're spending within the septic facility budget wouldn't be an issue. We would have enough expenditure authority to pay for the capital and to pay for this expense item. What we can do is we can pay for the other capital that we've already spent out of the septic facility budget, in addition to the $40,000 surprise capital item. And then we wouldn't be asking for anything related to transportation. I wanted to let everybody know why we exceeded our budget. It wasn't because that we poorly planned the budget. We didn't have enough forethought to have capital within the budget, and then understand that we couldn't pay for that capital. What we had to do is, because we already paid for those capital expenditures, we ran short on some of these items. So what we can do is we can say, we will use all $150,000 for capital.
I think when you define the capital items, then you should come back to us.
Okay, we have $40,000 for a chiller. Can we utilize the fund to pay for that?
That's the first item.
Yes,
Yeah,
can we,
you've already asked us for that.
can we utilize the fund to pay for that?
That's up to the board.
Is this an exercise, or is this an actual question you're asking? Does the board give the authority for that expense?
That is what I'm asking.
I make a motion, we authorize the expense of $40,000 at this point in time to be utilized to keep the plant running, and ask Ed to come back with a presentation for the additional money.
Do we need a presentation, or can we just give you a list of the capital that we've already spent out of the septic facility?
Either way is fine with me.
Okay, great.
So the 40,000 is going to be for the chiller, that expense?
That's correct.
All
And
right.
then we'll provide a list of the other capital items that we'll pay out of this fund, as opposed to paying it out of the expense fund. That will free up enough expense money to pay for the additional expense for transportation.
Time out. I hear what you're saying, but what you're telling me is that you're currently charging capital items to expense.
Within our budget, we have a capital line within the budget to pay for capital items, because what happened 6 years ago was that the capital was not maintained on a regular basis, and there needs to be ongoing work to do that. And we had to put, in order to keep the facility running, not shutting it down, we had to start maintaining our capital on a yearly basis, so that we could actually continue to run the plant. So the option 5 or 6 years ago was to shut it down, or to spend $2.5 million in capital spending to keep it going. And what we wanted to do is not be in that situation again. We actually put capital within the budget, routine capital within the budget, similar to what we're doing with the tax levy for the $1.5 million, so that we could keep the plant going. This is the only septage-only plant on Cape Cod. If we stop operation because we don't have enough spending authority, this will affect a lot of citizens throughout the Cape, including Yarmouth residents.
I'm not questioning the necessity for the plant or the benefits or anything of that nature. I'm just talking about the proper accounting for all the expenses.
Yeah, we'll give you that proper accounting. This is an emergency situation. If we had the April town meeting, we would have been using retained earnings to increase the expense line, and this wouldn't be an issue at all. We could transfer money from the general fund. You know, we could actually take money from other appropriations in the general fund. We had a conversation with the DOR about what we could do. We could take money from water to bail out septage. We could take money from the general fund to bail out septage. But septage doesn't need that type of bailout. It has a reserve fund that was designed to actually do these types of things. In the DOR's mind, there is no capital reserve fund. We just named it that way. You can't have a capital reserve fund in the septage facility. You can have a reserve fund, which can be used for any expense type, capital or non-capital. Now, the other request I would have is, do the other board members, will they allow us to utilize this reserve fund, actually have enough money to continue to operate the septic facility, or do we have to come back and, you know, have another discussion?
You returning to what you said previously, that you would provide an accounting, or like a statement as to where that other $110,000 is going toward capital expenditures?
Yeah, if we're forced to do that extra work, yes. However, I'm asking that we don't have to do that. We have a lot in front of us.
Then what's the point of even coming to the board?
We're asking permission to spend the money out of this fund.
I think it's important to have a proper accounting
Okay,
for operating expenses and capital expenses.
we'll take care of that for you then.
Is it a big deal to do that, Ed?
Okay. What's 15 hours a day?
Say that again?
Oh,
What's
boy.
doing 15 hours a day?
That's insubordination. Excuse me.
Mark?
I'll show you my time records.
Mr. Chairman, we have a motion on the floor. I'll second that.
All right, you're talking about the 40,000, right?
Right, Tracy put a motion on the table. I'd like to second it and see if we can at least move some of this along.
All right, let's do that, and let's vote on the $40,000 expenditure. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We'll call for a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Norm?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Tracy?
Aye.
I vote aye as well, so that's unanimous. So what about the other 110,000? What does the board wish to do about that?
Dan, you're muted. Dan, are you trying to speak? You're muted.
Mr. Chairman, if it's the board's wish to have a full accounting of that for the next meeting, we'll generate that for you.
I think that would be great.
No need for a vote.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That was all. On the next item, we go into the COVID updates, COVID-19 updates, if you wanted to move along.
Did we lose Mike?
I'm not sure. I don't see him anymore.
Yeah, we lost Mike for a second. I'm just getting him back on.
Okay. A lot of problems here at Town Hall today.
Yeah, I noticed that Eric Tolley is not, when you see the public display of our meeting, Eric is not on the display. It's just the four of us.
I'm made for audio, Mark.
You certainly are. You certainly are. Come on, Mike. Mike, you there?
I'm back.
All right.
I
Great.
don't know what happened. Like I totally crashed the second time. Nothing, black screen. So, Dan, we need an appropriation here for the chairman, you know?
I'll see if I can find some loose change around Town Hall. I'm not sure, though.
Okay, so I guess where I left off with you guys was what about the other 110? What
Yeah,
were they-
Mr. Chairman, I mentioned to the board members that there was no need for a vote. We'll come back at the next meeting with an accounting for that. As
Okay,
requested.
is that satisfactory to everybody?
Yep,
Okay,
I'm cool.
all right, I can see that that's the case. All right. Are we done with this?
Yes.
Okay, next item is COVID-19 updates and operations, FY20 budget impact.
Yeah, so we have a few transfers, as you can see in the transfer folder, but I wouldn't call the present 2020 budget situation any more with transfers any more challenging than past budgets have been. But we'll look for a complete report on the reconciliation a little bit later this month on that. But we're in pretty good shape right now. So the next big thing is to look at the tax returns and see how those property tax returns come in.
Okay,
Well, the next thing is there's a series of department-related work plans that you have in the packet. And the first one up is golf. And I've asked the director, Gilmore, to give us an update as it relates to, I know you got a couple of letters associated with that, and to give us an update as to where they are presently with golf and what the future looks like. So I hope he's still there.
Scott, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, we can hear you too, so that's good. You have an update on operations?
Yeah, so a couple, since we were in front of you a month or so ago, a couple of new restrictions got eased, if you will. Like we're able to do single rider carts now, as well as people in the same household can use the cart. So that was a big help for us, especially over at Bayberry, which is not so walker friendly. We also are able to sell stuff out of the pro shop with curbside pickup. So that's helpful too. We can sell golf balls, gloves, tees, that sort of thing. We don't have a full pro shop available yet, but we do have some items we can sell out of there. So also help. Those are the two main restrictions that got eased. We're still waiting on some other things. It looks like possibly in the next phase we might get the driving range open and possibly a tee time interval reduction. But right now we're still running at 15-minute tee time interval, which is a government mandate. We can't do anything about that, which some people think is a recommendation. It's not a recommendation, it's a requirement to be at that interval rate. So we're still running at half capacity of the golf courses, which led to some complaints on tee sheet and on the way we kind of do things a little bit. But Other than that, we've been kind of running as is, as our normal operation as much as possible. And that's kind of been the goal, is to stay as normal as possible during this COVID world we're in.
Scott, one of the complaints that I was hearing about over the Memorial Day weekend with respect to tea times or lack of tea times from members. I get that with the 15-minute interval, what's that cut the available tea times in half, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we only have
Okay.
50% available.
So in terms of the remaining tea times, how is that allocated in terms of greens fee players and members?
So the cheat sheet is set up in a 50-50 setup every day, but having that, we're not required to keep it that daily. Well before my time, it's been a 50-50 for the whole year. Now, being the way we're set up in enterprise and having to pay our own budget, if you will, and not go to town for money, which is always what we're looking to do, there is some certain days where we sell a lot of the times, and we have that, as you saw in the packet, that when tea times are available to the members, they'll be there. But there's certain cases like Memorial Day where we sold a lot of the sheet to public play. Now, having said that, we just went through a weekend where 58% of Bayberry was member and 52% of Bass River was all member play. So it will balance itself out on a yearly basis. Some weekends will be a lot more public, some will be a lot more members. So that's just the way we currently run.
But in terms of were all of the tea times blacked out for paying greens fee players, and then what was left over was allocated to the members? Is that how it worked, or was there some other method in play?
No, it wasn't necessarily blocked out. It's just we were so busy being the only public course taking public play at that time that no other course in municipal course was just doing member only. We were the only golf course that was able to accept some public play, or all, if you will. So we sold through a lot of the resident times, which, based on what I told you before, we have that ability to do because it's 50% throughout the year and not on a daily basis. So like I said, it will balance itself out throughout the year. There will be, and unfortunately you're just seeing this now because we're the 15-minute interval, but any changes to this will cause dramatic shifts in the way we're able to make some money. And we'll need some kind of sizable fund coming from the general fund or anything else for that matter to accommodate the 50-50 split, in which I sent you in the memo that we don't really run on a 50-50 split. It's a lot more daily public play that pays for a high percentage of the operation.
You know what the split was over the Memorial Day weekend in terms of members and non-members?
It was roughly 70-30 to non-members to members.
Okay.
Now, I would want to make this clear. There was times available to play for members over the Memorial Day weekend. They might not have been the time they wanted or the group to play together, but there were still times available to play. Now we're having a big issue where a lot of people's groups can't play together, and it's just, again, it's a lack of capacity issue at this point. We just can't place everybody or accommodate everybody, especially on weekends. Although last weekend we didn't have any waitlisted and not as much public play. So, I mean, and then as we come up to this weekend, we have a very busy Bass River tee sheet where we've already accepted all the money. So I guess what I'm trying to say, are we supposed to pass up on revenue at this point? I just don't know what the direction here is to go. This is how Yarmouth has always run.
Yeah, I understand that some of the members are arguing that the monies they pay $1,150 is also, should also be considered as revenue, even, I mean, it was front loaded, it's already been paid. But they feel that, you know, when the town talks about revenue coming in from non-member players, that kind of overshadows or minimizes the financial contributions that they're making. They are revenue generating golfers, are they not?
Well, they are. The membership is a revenue source, but as you can tell from the memo, it's roughly a third of what accounts for our overall budget. So we have to be mindful of that 2/3 come from outside sources. And like I said, any changes that will require some drastic changes to the way we operate, with a significant increase in the fee or possible subsidy to the general fund. That's just the way it would have to run.
All right, does anyone else have any questions or comments?
Just a
Chairman,
comment.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Scott, you mentioned that the tee time intervals were a government mandate.
That's correct.
Is the driving range closure also a mandate?
That is also a government mandate. We cannot open the facility until they give us the go-ahead.
Well, I've been on Mass Golf's Twitter page, and there are communities that have opened their driving ranges and have successfully implemented protocols to meet government guidelines, so to speak, and keep their driving ranges open. Are you aware of any of those communities and the protocols that they've put in place?
I'm aware of some. I think Dan can elaborate a little bit. He heard of a couple out in Western Mass that were open and then had to force closure.
So to Scott's point, the town of Hamden chose to allow their driving range in that town, a privately owned operation, to operate. They chose not to enforce the order, so the state recently sent them a cease and desist over the weekend. So that's, you know, what should be up against. The town next door, the town enforced the order, and that became a bit of an issue between the two towns. But in the end, it's on the state to enforce their own edict, if you will, if the local government chooses not to.
And the state has actually come down on driving ranges?
Yeah, there was an article in the paper. It's a driving range out of Hamden. It's a golf course over in Hamden, Mass. The state ordered it closed until the proper phase opening. And even though they had a plan, the local board of health in Hamden was fine with the plan. They gave them their blessing and they opened. They actually were open for some time. There must have been obviously public complaint. It was covered in the newspaper quite heavily out there, and the state came down and issued them a shutdown order.
Yeah, but I'm sorry.
What are the issues? I don't understand.
It's out of phase. It's not allowed in that phase, in the phase that we're in right now.
I understand the phasing, but what are the specific issues that are necessitating the closure of driving ranges?
I'd ask the state government as to, you know, what's the big issue if they have a plan in place and it's lends itself to all the rules that we know that are out there in place, what harm is there? But in the issue in Hamden, it came down to, it simply is the order. It's not allowed to be open at this point in time. But maybe next week, phase 2, it would be.
So that's the justification, is because the state has deemed that it's in phase 2, then we aren't able to use our own common sense and establish protocols that would meet all other guidelines.
I would agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, I would agree too. I mean, we're ready to go once we do get the go ahead. We have a plan in place to be 6 feet apart, to be on the grass. I mean, it's not overly difficult to do that. It's just, we just can't, and it's unfortunate, but we just can't right now.
Well, I disagree.
Well,
I tend to think whatever the hell we want.
You know, you decided to open it up and we decided not to have a local enforcement, then it would become an issue for the state. That's correct.
think what's interesting is, you know, golf with all of its being outdoors, whether it be a putting green, a driving range, or golfing itself. It has these restrictions, and yet when they're talking about restaurants,
That's what they want.
they're likely to open outside, but not inside, because apparently it's less of a health risk outside. I find the two positions a bit incongruous.
Yeah,
Right, and I brought up last time that there is absolutely no evidence to support the theory that the virus is spread outdoors. You know, golf is a solitary individual sport by its very nature. Our driving ranges are set up so that you can't be within 6 feet of one another. You know, if the issue is of touching tokens or of touching dirty golf balls or dirty baskets, you know, there are ways around those things. But, you know, if the issue is separation, then that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Scott, are you confident that June 8th is a potential date for this change?
I believe so, but you know, I don't really know. I mean, we tend to get the word like tomorrow that it might happen, and then it happens at like 10:30 that day, and then it leaves for very little planning to accommodate. But it sounds like June 8th is the next step to get some restriction eased. And we are the last state that has the driving range closes. There's no other state in the country that is doing this.
So what happens if we open and the state comes down? Is they going to slap us on the wrist the first time?
Well, if they follow their own guidance, it's a verbal followed by no less than 24 hours between a return visit, followed by a written, no less than 24 hours, followed by 3 consecutive $300 event penalties after that. So
in a week might cost us $1,000.
Well, I can't say for sure, but that's the guidance.
Then?
What?
How did they, I'm just asking Dan how they issued a cease and desist on Hamden.
Well, that's the guidance that we got for local enforcement. At the state level, I don't think the article in the newspaper went into the exact detail, but there might be something within the executive order that gives the governor's authority to be able to do that. But the guidance that we officially have that we're supposed to follow when there's complaints is 1, 2, 3, just like I explained it.
Well, I'm going to throw it out there. I make a motion, we open the driving range, see what happens.
I'll second that.
So Dan, can I ask you another question? Did that cease and desist order apply to just the driving range, or did they shut down the entire golf operation?
It was a driving range. I'd have to look at the rest of the article to see what else they were running there, but it was specifically dealing with the driving range because that's a phase 2.
All right, I just want to make sure that we're not jeopardizing the other potential.
Give me a couple of minutes, I'll send it over to you.
Scott, what kind of revenue does the driving range generate?
A couple $100,000 a year if we're open the whole year.
And what have we lost out on so far? And just a guesstimate.
Probably 50,000 or so, depending on just because the weather was terrible in the first half. But yeah, right, probably around 50,000 for being closed for 50 days and now plus some.
Just from experience, my bet is that most of that revenue is generated in May through probably last part of mid-September, just because that's when people are gearing up and getting out and so forth. And then during the periods of heavy play, people get out and hit balls before they go out and play. And so probably only 25% of the people that play on a daily basis use the range. But my point is that, I think it's a pretty narrow period of time. And I would agree with Scott that I think we probably have already lost a fair amount of revenue as a result of the closure.
Well, May through September is 5
15th
months,
is-
so we've lost 20%. So we've lost $20,000. If it generates 100,000 over the course of the season.
Scott, didn't you say 200?
Yeah, it's a couple hundred. It's more than 100. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I'm sorry about that, but it's around a couple 100,000 that we make off the range.
Okay.
Well, it's my personal opinion. I think we should wait until we find out about, like we did the last time. Wait and see what happens on the 8th. And if not, then we should put it on our agenda. I think in the scheme of things, golf is open. We're making progress. I just want to see golf operation update. I'm not sure that there's a vote on here about.
Oh, there's no need for a vote. It was just to give you an update as to where we're at right now.
Well, Eric just made a motion, so that's why I'm asking.
Mark, what do you think?
I'm with Tracy. I'm not prepared to say yes right now.
Have we seen Scott, is there a policy in place now? Should the golf course open? You alluded to the fact that even when you find out, you're not prepared. So, I mean, if we open is there cleaning mechanisms, token mechanisms? Are there things in place right now ready to go if it were to open?
We need about a day or so just to get everything in place, but we're about ready to go. I mean, we'll station everybody 6 feet apart. We're debating just in-house about whether to put someone there to hand the balls out, or because it is a token system right now, but we do have sanitizer for the balls and the buckets going. So everything will be cleaned before everybody gets before someone else takes it again. But we're about ready to go. We just need about a day lead time to get everything up and running.
So we're 6 days away from June 8th. We need a day. That gives us 5 days. By the time we get caught, that's 4 days. First warning is 3 days. Second warning is 2 days. I'm just tired of other people controlling this town's destiny, and I think we need to take control of it ourselves.
We also need to lead by example on a lot of fronts. So I think, I'd be more comfortable having this discussion next week, personally.
I think if we lead by example, we'll follow the example of some other businesses in town.
Yeah, it's one thing when people do something on their own, Norm. It's another thing when the leaders of their town say, do it. So that's my position. If a business wants to do what they want to do, then that's on them.
Well, my argument is we are the leaders of this town, and why can't we handle our business?
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Eric, and I understand the frustration. I do. But I think that there's a process here, and, it's not moving fast enough for us. I get that, but there's a lot of businesses out there that are struggling even more. We have the golf course open. There's a lot of businesses that are not open, that are not able to operate. And we're gonna, take a vote on something. I haven't seen the plan, number one. It's not on the agenda. So I'm just comfortable waiting till next week. That's my personal opinion, but I understand where you're coming from. And I do agree that it's our town and you should do what you want.
We have an email that came in from David Reed, and do we still have that individual that's raising? We have somebody that's raising their hand. Let me just cut away for a second and see what that's all about. No, you go ahead and do it. Kyle's gonna read the email.
This is from David Reed. Members of the board, the members understand Scott's difficult task in balancing member times and public times of play. What the members ask for is fairness, information, and involvement. We need to understand what the plan is and how times will be allocated going forward. Please keep our adult members informed as to what is being done and what is available to us. Shifting schedules should not be a secret or something we find out about after the fact. Try to keep us informed and involved. Thank you, David Reed.
Okay, what about the person that was raising their hand?
Morag Massel is now ready to speak.
Okay, Morag, can you hear us? No, he's muted. Oh, he doesn't. Morag, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Jerry Garnick. I'm on my wife's computer because my computer is not working.
So you snuck in through the back door. If I knew it was you, Jerry, you'd still be muted.
Yeah, I know. And if I knew you were chairman, I wouldn't have talked to you. So anyway, here's the point I'm making. I think I think the policy you have of saying that over the year it balances between paid players and the members is really misleading, because that would mean that if you look at the tee sheets for the whole 9 months or 8 months that we play golf, then you can say, okay, we had the times available, but we made up the 50% time for the members in November and December. If it's a yearly calculation, it can't be a yearly calculation, because if it's a yearly calculation, you're allowing those tee times in November and December to be counted the same as June, July, and August. And that's incorrect. I listened to you, Mr. Chairman, on the letter that you talked about at the beginning of this meeting in the public session, and I came in a little late, so I don't know who wrote that letter about all the different policies that were taking place in the different towns.
That was Michael Sarrazin.
Okay, and Mr. Sarrazin's letter, it was extraordinarily well written and very thoughtful. My problem with the town on this issue is that I do not believe that this board has taken the responsibility to make the policies that should be governed and implemented by the employees. It's not up to the employees to decide how to use a town facility. It's up to this board to make the policy. And in order to make the policy, you have to have deliberation, you have to have input. You just can't have one person, as good as Scott is, to make those decisions and have him have the sole responsibility of making these decisions. It should come from this board in total. And the idea to say for Scott to have the belief that because at the end of the year, we're going to have 50-50 tee times is not reasonable. Because I'll tell you, the first time I played with my group as a group was this past Saturday. From the time the course opened up, it was the first time was this past Saturday. Up until that time, it's like a scavenger hunt. You go on the day before afternoon and you try and get a tee time, and you're having members playing with out of town guests who you don't know, who you don't care to play with, and it's not as enjoyable as you have if you have tee times with your buddies and you're playing with the usual group. So I think if you take the policy that you have now and recognize that it is not fair to the members, and you take Mr. Sarrazin's letter and you start some sort of committee that creates a policy that determines exactly how these tee times should be allocated. Because right now, you have a group of members that are absolutely irate at how this process is handling. And you're gonna, maybe you don't care, but I know you're gonna lose a lot of members come next year if this continues.
If I may chime in for a minute, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Scott.
I don't believe it's as big an issue as Mr. Garnick's been saying, because he plays almost every day, and it's not our job, if you will, to have everybody's group play out there. We are running at 50% capacity. It's just, that's just the situation we're in. Now, when that, if and when that gets reduced, a lot of things will go back to normal, but we are running at half capacity. We just cannot accommodate everybody in all their groups. We are trying our hardest to make it work for everybody. And I'd like to chime in a little more about Mike Sarrazin's letter, as every other golf course or municipal course has more crazy restrictions than we do. So I don't really see any value to Mike Sarrazin's letter, as Cranberry Valley is only open 8 to 4 every day. We are running more normal than any other golf course, and we're still having a problem accommodating everybody. We have members coming from Cranberry Valley playing us because they can't get on their own course, as well as Dennis and Barnstable. So I don't see what the big issue is here. And this policy was well before my time and in Jim's time at some point. So, and unless, like I said, you're willing to change it, they all have signed off as tee times are available. And some weekends, as Mr. Garnick played last weekend, you will get a time right where you want it with your group. And other weekends, it might not just happen. During the week, it's always going to happen for you. But at some point, we have to understand the revenue needs to support the operation. And that's a lot of the revenue comes from outside sources. It's just the way it is in Yarmouth at this point.
Can I say something?
Sure, go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, to Scott's point, you know, I've played with a group that for this year has disbanded, but played with several groups over the last 15 years. And we've never had problems getting tee times. And was it difficult at times? Yeah, difficult, but not impossible. And with one understanding, and that was during the first 2 weeks of July, the golf course has always made it well known that it is unlikely that the resident golfers would be able to get tee times, and because the demand would be so high from non-residents. And that's been always well received. It's okay. We understand that situation. Now, what I'm getting to is that the current situation is simply the result of going to 15-minute intervals, and we have half the tee times available. So the situation has essentially created the same scenario that exists in the first 2 weeks of July. And I understand the frustration that goes along with that for the resident golfers. But I don't think that we should be formulating a major change in policy based upon an emergency situation and upon a situation in which the golf course only has about half of what it normally has available. I think that allow the course to work through this period of time, and you know, in probably in another 2 weeks we'll have the situation ironed out. But you know, I think again, going off on a major study, we don't need a major study. Previous to this, there weren't any issues. As I said, during the first 2 weeks of July, it was well known and well recognized by all the resident golfers and the groups that priority would be given to non-resident play, and that was not a problem. So it seems to me if we're going to chase after some major change, we're just spending a lot of time on an issue that doesn't exist.
Okay. I think we're going to stop here in the interest of time, and we'll continue this if necessary. As Norm says, let's wait and see what happens in the next few weeks. If that 15-minute tea time restriction is lifted, I think that might solve at least part of the problem. If not all of the problem, I don't know. But that seems to be a big factor.
That's the ultimate factor. We're just running at half capacity, and it looks like in the June 8th window, somewhere in that time frame, that I know Mass Golf is working hard to get it down to 10 minutes. And if they do that within the next couple of weeks, that's what we're looking at.
That Eric, Norm has seconded, that Tracy and Mark have not supported, and I'd really rather wait a week as well. So I would prefer if we just defer that motion until next week.
Stop it.
All right.
I can send you guys the plan for the range if you would like, so you can look at it. So if we do get to go ahead on June 8th, you're,
that would be
fully
good.
aware. So I'll get that in the next day or two, so you can take a look at that.
All right. Can we move forward to the police COVID-19 operations plan?
Yeah, the next series of plans are for your own benefit if you had any questions on them. So public buildings continue to be closed to the public. We're expecting at some point phase 2 that buildings could be opened up to the public. I do know that the state is working on general guidance for public building openings. We have a number of conditions we have to meet here, including the procurement of transparency shields, which have been ordered, but they're on back order about 4 weeks. So we won't get these shields like you've been seeing at the supermarkets and the convenience stores and the drugstores for sometime around 4th of July. On top of that, the staff is working presently on the self-certification plan that the state has generated. So for every operation that we have open to the public, we have to generate a self-certification plan and also include on that some posters for the public that need to be made available. So recreational activities, as you see here, pickleball, for instance, is up for phase 2 opening. So we've included that. So we wanted to make sure that there's a plan in place that's compliant with the state's requirements, and that's why it's in front of you right now. Library curbside pickup program, similar to retail curbside, that's going to be up and running shortly. And I don't know exactly, like I said, when public would be allowed access into the library style buildings, but as soon as that is available, we'll work on a safety plan to make that happen.
So Dan, what you're saying after the 4th of July for town hall?
Well, we have to get, in order to take the public in to take processing that was normally done face-to-face, we won't have the transparency shields that will be part of the safety precautions. So I don't want to go back to the idea that we're going to just have wide open access. If we get the state guidance shortly on what allowance would take place, short of that, we could begin to open up by appointment. That seems to be how everybody's handling this right now, is you'd set up an appointment time with whatever department you wanted to do business with. One of the other challenges we have with the staff in the building, we only have, because of the reduced capacity within the building, is down to 25%. At any one time, we can only have about 8 people from the public in the building at present staffing loads. So there's some challenges that we have to manage as it relates to overall how many people can be within the building, and then how does that interaction look like. I can tell you that even though a plan might say we can now open to the public, the other issue you have to address is your staff members and their willingness to engage the public as well. And we're working through that now with all these different safety plans we've got to generate. So I don't have a hard and fast date.
I guess I don't understand, you go to a market, you go to a garden supply store, there's people all over the place. And masks, sure, with masks, but I don't understand the big restrictions that are being interpreted for our public facilities compared to what's going on in the world at this point.
Those are considered essential businesses that you've described. The vast majority of public buildings aren't considered to be essential. There are certain people that perform essential functions within those facilities in those organizations, but the process of allowing the public unfettered access or access without having these control plans or out of phase is not right now something that we're supposed to be opening up to. So there's a lot to consider, including we have an MOA with the SEIU union that has about 90 members, many of which are staffing town hall. So we have to work through some issues associated with that, which we're doing.
What MOA? I'm not familiar.
Memorandum of understanding that we're still under an emergency order. So as long as that emergency order is out there, there's the issue about employees that aren't necessarily required to perform essential work and what that means to them and their work.
Well, I think it's important for the public to understand that then it's the union that is causing a difficult time for the services to be provided.
No, I don't think that's a fair articulation. I think we're also waiting for further guidance from the state as they have indicated for opening public buildings to the people. I mean, you have to appreciate the idea that I understand that there's some folks that have their personal opinions on this issue, but the reality is that for a lot of the folks that perform jobs right now, many of them have indicated to me their reticence to come back and do that job as it was formerly done. And they have provisions under federal law that they could invoke that could really cause a pinch to us as it relates to delivering services to the public.
Well, I guess we should outsource town hall.
Well, so that being said, one of the other items on here is parks, conservation area, and town boardwalks. And I did get a memo from Mr. Murphy that the Board of Health did officially vote to allow access to Gray's Beach Boardwalk. But further to that, because in phase 2, all of these other public facilities are being able to be open to the public. I wanted to have the board be able to weigh in and take a vote to open all these things. And that's why Director Colby generated the memo for you.
Right, so what do we have to do at this point? Does it require a motion?
Yeah, just a motion in accordance with the town parks, conservation areas, and the boardwalks by order of the Board of Selectmen, consistent with the COVID safety practices, are ordered open to the public.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
I vote aye as well, so that's a unanimous vote.
Thank you. The next thing is that we have to address is approval of the warrant as generated. So Kyle, if you could bring that up. So this is how it appears right now today, based on information that we have in front of us, scheduled for June 22nd, 7 o'clock, potentially at Mattokees Middle School. And later in tonight's meeting, shortly after this topic, is some information for you about deciding how we're going to go about doing town meeting.
Mr. Chairman, can we go back to Karen Green's memo? Because I think we skipped that.
No, Karen's status of town events and use of town property. That's after the warrant.
Okay, I guess my packet's backwards.
It's okay. It's coming up real soon. So, okay.
Can I just ask a question about the town?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a question about the town parks? The town parks are going to be open then to the public.
Yes. Not playgrounds. No, playgrounds aren't ready to go yet, but parks are. Parks, conservation areas, boardwalks. Playgrounds are a problem because of the sanitation issue we've got.
Okay, so if I bring my golf clubs over to the park area and decide to hit a few balls around, that's probably all right, isn't it?
I'm not sure unless the park has a rule that says you can't do that. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right.
Does that mean dog parks as well?
It could mean dog parks as well. I have to just talk to Jeff. He was on vacation last week. I'm meeting with him tomorrow to further refine some of this stuff, and I'll send you an update on that. But that was the plan.
All right, so we're on the proposed ATM warrant.
Yep. So we're at the point where we have to make a decision as to what'll finally appear so that we can go to production with the document.
So has anything changed since we last spoke? I remember us talking about the necessary financial articles, the CPC articles, and then the petitioned articles were going to appear, but they were going to be deferred. Am I correct on that?
Right, so the only thing I believe it's all in order except for the late breaking news on the school assessment. That would have to be amended. The number that's here in the article, Article 6, I believe it is. But this is as was presented as of last week's guidance.
Okay, and the deadline for that's tonight?
Well, yeah, because we have to be able to get this off to print and do all the other things with advertisement, get it up on the town website and start generating interest on it.
Okay.
I guess I'm sorry to bring this up at this point, but the starting time is 7 PM.
Yeah.
Given the length of the warrant, the things that we've had to leave in it, yeah, is it possible for us to move that up?
Well, that's up to you, but so a little bit later in the agenda, I gave you a memo today that talked about 4 different options as to where to hold the meeting. And part of that could include, I had further discussions with Dennis. Dennis, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, if I take some of these issues out of order a
No,
little
go
bit.
ahead.
So Dennis is going to set up a tent at Wixon. They're going to go on the 23rd, which is a Tuesday. So they've already made the plan. I'm getting the information from them on how much all that's going to cost. DY, as you heard tonight, is going to do an outdoor open air graduation ceremony at the football field. And one of the thoughts in discussing that earlier today with Mr. Jenks was that if we did a Saturday morning at like 9 o'clock in the morning open air, we wouldn't have to worry about what the turnout would be. You have plenty of space available on that football field, including the bleachers, and you have a good PA system to be able to communicate. The only issue becomes, do you or do you not want to have a tent if you wanted to go that route? If you do a nighttime meeting and you do a tent, you're going to need to have lighting for that. We also looked at Matakees, and in the memo, Matakees is a pretty good option because it's like one room, it's a couple hundred capacity. What we factored in just for the capacity figure, 6 feet away from everybody. But if you were a couple, you're allowed to sit next to each other, say. So, and I would imagine at town meeting, like I've seen over the years, there's going to be a lot of couples. So to some degree, that's going to skew a little bit. We might get a little bit more than 200 capacity available. But based on raw numbers and spacing with 6 feet, including using the basketball court, that's what was generated out of Matakees. DY is an interesting option, the high school, because if you use the auditorium as the principal place, it looks like you could get somewhere north of 65 people. It is air conditioned. And then we could move and have the gym as a backup, the 2 gyms, and you would accommodate all together with the cafeteria, a number closer to 300 people. And that's part of our challenge. We just don't know how many folks are going to show up.
So what would you have, screens going from the auditorium?
Yeah, so we would have to work with an audiovisual company to generate, present screens and audio amongst all the different facilities. The school has PA capabilities within all the buildings, with all the rooms. So we would have to organize the audiovisual aspect of it. Clearly, using Matakees alone, it's one very large open area with a pretty decent capacity level. And that logistically is the easiest thing to pull off for us.
Well, the $64,000 question is, what happens if you have your 200 people and other people are still coming in?
Well, that is the big problem, right? And to Selectman Holcomb's point at 7 o'clock, I had mentioned an earlier time before, but some of the sentiment at the time with the board was that they didn't want to interrupt people's dinner hour, but that's clearly something totally up to you as to what time you want to start this. And I have kept the moderator in the loop in all these communications that I've had.
Are any of these articles likely to generate a lot of debate?
It's hard to know.
It seems like a lot of these are pretty straightforward financial articles.
In the past,
Usually it's the petition articles.
yeah,
Yeah,
the petitioners are all on board with us moving those though, so that's not something I'm so worried about.
but they do agree to put those over to the fall, right?
Yes, they're all on board with that. We've had conversations with them, and all that would have to be done is the board, as a board itself, would have to make the motion to put them all on the town fall meeting.
Right, so they don't have to go out and get the signatures
That's
all
correct.
over again.
That's right.
Right.
I don't think anything's overly controversial, but then again, I could be wrong.
No, I understand. You can never tell, but I mean, as Norm's pointed out, I think these petitioned articles generally do take an awful lot of time.
And I think there's a certain understanding by the community at large as it relates to the circumstances here. In that, you know, it's not just us that were looking to try to reduce the amount of articles. It's been very widely reported as a thing that all the towns are trying to do. So it just comes down to the matter, how many people do you think are going to show up?
What was the capacity of the dentist tent?
I don't know offhand. I'm waiting for information back on that. We have a request to the town clerk over there. But, you know, they're open air in a field. So even if people are outside the tent, you'd have accommodations for that.
And they're doing it on the 20.
They're the 23rd, the Tuesday. Yeah.
They set it up on the 22nd. We could have the meeting there.
Yeah, well, I talked to them about that, and they asked how we would like to go over to Dennis to do that. I said, well, why don't you go to DY High School? And they commented back to me that we'd have the same problem over there. So I tried. I asked.
Well, does anybody have any thoughts on the warrant? And are we ready to take a vote to approve the warrant?
I'll make a motion to approve the warrant as printed.
Have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
So we're giving up on the idea of starting it earlier.
No, we're gonna defer that question until a little bit later. We're just talking about the warrant articles at this point,
Okay,
not the time of the meeting. That's still subject to debate or discussion.
okay, that's on the front page of this thing.
Yeah, it's all right.
That would be changed before it went to the printer if we decided to do it at a
Well, that's
different
fine. Okay, okay.
Okay, so we'll ask for a roll call vote. Eric,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So that's a unanimous approval of the warrant articles, except for the time, which we're gonna have a separate discussion on. Status of town events and use of town property.
Yeah, so there is a memo in there. I asked Mrs. Green to generate a memo. We have a lot of requests, people looking to use town facilities. And if you follow along in the Times, most of the town events, a lot of them are being postponed or canceled altogether. And so we just wanted some further guidance as to what the board sentiment was on that. I can tell you that there is a lot of interest on the drive-in site by drive-in operators, because drive-ins are specifically allowed under phased opening. So,
I think driving would be great.
yeah, I think that bodes well for the future, but because it's a very bare bones facility now, we have 3 viable applicants looking to do something there. So
I think we should get a new drive-in committee and make sure that they just limit their discussions to drive-ins.
So in general, though, I wanted to know, is the board's sentiment to just postpone all things till after Labor Day? We do have some weddings, people in wedding intentions, like at Taylor Bray Farm and whatnot, and there just isn't any guidance. And so we've been kind of telling them, waiting until, we get phase-in guidance from the state, but.
I thought we discussed this at our last meeting and we didn't want to take any action on.
Well, I didn't ask for any specific. I was just updating you to let you know at the time, all the different activities that we're used to and what their status was presently. The vast majority of activities have been pulled by the organizers, but there's some number of them that do trickle in. One of them is, we're reviewing now, is a couple of, sunrise services at the beaches. And that's a situation, I think, with proper protocols in place, there's not an issue necessarily with that. So, in general, we just wanted to get what your sentiment was. If you think that we should continue to take in applications based on state guidance and work with the applicants to try to pull something off, we certainly can work in that realm. But many towns around us have just canceled everything.
I like your idea of working with them. I think if they can meet the criteria, canceling things for an outdoor pavilion now for Labor Day, in August, it could be a totally different scenario. I think that would be a mistake, and especially if it's outside and people can social distance or follow any protocols. I would be against postponing town events unless we know specifically there's some reason we need to.
I agree with that. I'd rather see us have an open policy and trying to make things work rather than just, it seems to me that many other towns have been, perhaps premature in their judgments. And I just soon see us be more open to and working within whatever guidelines are established, but trying to accelerate the timetable for getting back to normal.
I agree. And I'm a huge fan of bringing the drive-in back. I think that that's something that, people are looking for things to do. They can't go out. I think it would be a phenomenal thing for our community to provide that. It's a very safe thing, staying in your own vehicle. I think it'd be a great idea.
Well, short of having a vote, if anybody else has anything to say, I will continue going down that mode.
The sentiment seems to be we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis, right?
Yep. Seems
So
I got.
let's move on.
Hey,
can I just, one of just bring something up on that issue in terms of having our board act on every little item that is presented to Karen Green and to you, Dan. Just it slows down the process, and I'm wondering if we can arrive at some other. Does this board have to approve every every event that's going to occur on town property?
So typically the way it goes on is unless, when there's been pre-existing activities that go on that need specifically your approval, there's an applicant form that gets filled out and it appears normally on the consent agenda as a recurrent event. When it's something completely brand new to us, like Ragnar Road Relay Race was last year, we would bring it to you for an approval because it's a first time go through. Same thing with like the Irish Festival. But in general, this has, there's a lot of different town facilities that are used for different type of things. And across the Cape, other boards of selectmen have been weighing in on these issues. I don't feel comfortably personally saying, that I should say no to somebody if the Board of Selectmen says yes to something. So that's why we wanted to get your sentiment here. We're still in this time frame where there's not a lot of state guidance. And I think out of ease of the default position being easiest to say no is I think what a lot of towns just simply did just to take care of it. But if, you know, the sentiment is we'll work with the applicants based on the guidance that's out there and we can feel comfortable and it's a pre-existing event, then we'll go through the normal traditional route on approving things.
Okay, yeah, I would hate to see things get so complex and so cumbersome that it ends up being an effective closure of you know, to uses that are being proposed. So
Understood.
yeah, I would hope that we can accelerate anything, not to the point of creating a dangerous situation. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I think being open and moving ahead swiftly on applications is important.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you a heads up, the leagues, the baseball leagues, like the intermediate leagues, Babe Ruth and Little League, they're all getting ready to restart their season. So they use a lot of our facilities. So there's, you know, that's something we'll work with the leagues directly to get them to the point where, you know, they can do these activities in accordance with the guidance that's out there. But all that's coming down, and we certainly didn't have any desire to shut that off if the state said go ahead and do it. You know, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Okay. How about regulatory relief for businesses?
Yeah, so Kyle, can you bring that memo up? So we've been kind of trying to get ahead of the regulations issue as it relates, because obviously it's kind of complicated in the best of circumstances often to do business activity. So we wanted to bring you up to speed as to what's been done to date to assist the businesses. And we've generated a new resource web page. We have the CBDG grant that has had a number of applicants. There'll be awards coming soon for business relief. But certainly the biggest issue that's in front of us right now is the last 48 hours worth of information that's come down to us related to opening up restaurants. So as I was discussing earlier this evening with the chairman, that it looks like there's 3 avenues, if you will, for restaurants. The easiest, of course, is just I want to serve food outside. And we have an internal procedure in place that can get that underway with very little bureaucracy. But we have to develop a protocol on that, which we're working on right now. The second leg of that stool is not only do I want to serve outside, serve food outside, I want to add my alcohol license to that. That's a little bit more complicated. There's been special legislation that allows the ABCC process to be waived. However, there's a local approval that we have to make sure we have the appropriate plan in place. And there is guidance from ABCC on these outdoor events that our normal businesses wouldn't be familiar with, like the area that you're serving alcohol and has to be secure, and whatever that looks like. Could be roped entrance ways or something like that, so that you can't just pass through the alcohol area. A responsible person has to be able to see the alcohol activities going on at all times. So they'd have to ensure compliance with that. But one of the issues that came up when we were discussing that, we had a very long meeting today internally about this, was hours of operation. Many of our alcohol related establishments operate either close at 11 or 1. And if they're moving to outdoors, I'm not thinking that that's necessarily going to be a situation that the board's going to want to endorse to happen. So that policy or procedure for the board will be presented to you next meeting for the approval mechanism for that, which is, it's been definitely expedited, but there's some issues, including for the business. They're going to have to get an insurance rider to have that activity done outside. They're going to have to give us an amended site plan and things of that nature. And then the last component is if somebody wants to have some entertainment, like their pipe music to be generated outdoors, that's an entertainment license issued by the board. Same situation. There's got to be conditions on it and how you want that to address. So the entire, if you will, and I forget the exact language that the state uses, but the procedures the board needs to have to approve these things will be in front of you as a draft for next week's meeting.
So Dan, we could approve it, but we don't have to have a public hearing on it?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I talked to the chairman about this. I think we need to have further clarification on that process. We do have a local procedure for, particularly with entertainment license, where we have to do abutters notices. But I believe with alcohol, the ABCC drove that, and that's out now, but we still have to have a local process. Does that mean the board has to have a hearing for all these things? I'm gonna check in with council tomorrow, and if that's the case, then we'd get them all set up like we do now, and we'd have to come up with a schedule for, the chairman can speak better to this, but maybe 3 members of the board on rotating nights to move through. We have a lot of restaurants I'm gonna anticipate that are gonna wanna come through this process.
Well, can't we do it all in one fell swoop? Can't we reach out to the businesses and ask them for their insurance certificate and their plan and then advertise everybody?
Well, we're gonna do that, but not everybody's gonna be swift enough to get all that information to us in a timely fashion.
Well, you get, I mean, all this public notice stuff that's required, sending out cards to everybody and all that, you know, we've got to get through that.
You don't have to do that, Norm.
What's that?
You don't have to do that under the new
Okay.
order from the governor.
You know, and it seems to me if a restaurant wants to have outdoor seating and that is effectively replacing seating that is inside, why would we object to that?
Well, it's not a
I mean-
matter of that. It's a matter, if they want to have food, they can do that. But if they want to serve alcohol, the state law addresses how to have alcohol outdoors. And that has to be under the special legislation. The local board of selectmen have been given the authorization as the license grantor to expedite that process. In order to do that, we have a responsibility to ensure that that standard that they put forward is met by those businesses on how alcohol outdoors needs to be conducted. It's not just, I can serve it indoors, so I can serve it outdoors. It doesn't work that way.
I talked to Jay briefly about this. He had returned a call that I made to him, but phone never rang. It went straight to voicemail. So when I understood that he called me back, it was close to meeting time, but I did spend 10 or 15 minutes talking to him about this. And as I understand it, we don't deal with the notice provisions and the public notice and the abutters notices. We don't have to deal with that. But we would still have to have, again, based on Jay's interpretation, a hearing to grant the license for the outdoor seating. Because we're the licensing authority.
Well,
And
does the hearing require public notice and all that stuff?
no. They basically come to you with a submission, a drawing, a sketch, show you how many spaces they're gonna have, how many tables, that they're gonna be 6 feet apart, what their hours are gonna be, probably what precautions they're gonna implement with their servers, things like that. And then you would grant them the license. Now, the ABCC put out an advisory and said that notwithstanding that, you still have to observe their requirements, as Dan just mentioned, for outdoor service of alcohol, which involves, I don't know them all off the top of my head, but roping off the area and making sure it's secure, things like that, making sure that you have a clear view of what's going on out there, things that we've dealt with in our licensing hearings before. And then you grant the license, and then the ABCC has to be notified of the action that you took. They don't approve it. They're not involved in that process, but they have to know what you did, because they have to know what is the legal licensed part of those premises. The part of the premises where the alcohol sold has to be described in the license, and it obviously won't be in there. You're going to have to add that, maybe give some kind of a brief memo that goes up to the ABCC saying you've authorized this porch area, or you've authorized this parking lot, or whatever the case may be. But my understanding is you do not have to go through any notice requirements.
Well, we'd have to have a posted, advertised.
No.
A meeting. a hearing? We
Oh,
don't
yeah, you'd have to probably post the agenda and you'd probably schedule a whole bunch of them at once.
I would schedule all of them, and I think it's
Well,
important.
you're gonna get a lot of them. I asked Tom Murphy what he expected. He's the president of the Yarmouth Restaurant Association, and nobody really knows, but his gut instincts was you may have up to half of the restaurants in town that want to do this.
Well, that's great, and I hope that potentially this could happen on June 8th. Is that correct? I think we should schedule a meeting for June 8th, advertise it, reach out to every business and ask them to provide their plan, their sketch, so that way we can do it.
They also have to get zoning relief if they're not authorized for that. But again, that's an abbreviated process where we, as the Board of Selectmen, could appoint, for example, the building commissioner to make those determinations. And people would submit.
Why can't we waive, why can't we, if we're the governing body with regard to those zoning requirements, why can't we waive them?
You can.
I think they've done that in other towns.
You're really suspending those until November under the governor's order. It expires automatically.
I think the way it was explained to me, you're asking or the board, the building commissioner to be able to have authorization to do a temporary zoning variance till the period not to exceed November 30th or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you don't have to appoint him. You could have a committee, you could do a lot of different things, but that seems to me to be probably the most expeditious way of doing it.
Can I ask that we schedule a meeting for Monday to deal specifically with this in light of the fact that if that is allowed by the governor on Monday, then, I don't think we should wait. We shouldn't be the ones holding up these businesses.
It's already allowed.
Outdoor alcohol service?
No, so it's two different things. So like I said, if you wanted to serve food, just food right now, you would need to just simply, and you were in an inside establishment, but you want to do it outside, you would have to, right now under our rules, apply for a zoning determination. If you're okay in that zone, our internal procedure could turn that around right away. If you're not authorized in that zone, to the point that the chairman was just talking about, you would need to appoint say, for instance, the building commissioner as the authority able to offer or to grant that temporary zoning relief for some period of time. So that's one issue. Second to that is if somebody says, okay, I want to do food and I want to do alcohol, that brings in a little bit more complexity. They have to generate the plan, the seating chart, security for the perimeter, how they're going to control the dispensing of alcohol and monitor it and all that. They have to amend their certificate of insurance to include that outside area. We have fees for that. I would assume that the board would want to waive those fees because of this hardship situation. So there's a whole series of processes that they would have to fill out like any application to get it to you so you can review it and approve it. That's what we're working on internally right now.
And then we have to go before the Board of Health for the food too.
Yeah, so the Board of Health is an inspectional activity. So once we get notified that this is what somebody wants to do, they do an inspection. So that we've got covered. It's just alcohol and entertainment, which was more complicated.
My guess is on the alcohol, we'll probably get a lot of applications and we'll probably have to have some special nights set aside in addition to our regular business to just go through a whole bunch of licensing applications, and we'll need a majority of the board. So we don't need 5 members. We could take turns or rotate and make sure we have 3 board members on each of those nights.
Well, I suggest Monday, because I think that putting this off and making it more difficult.
I don't know that we're going to have any applications by then.
Well,
because we have to first develop a procedure. And even though the ABCC can't mess with it, we have to send that information to them, what our procedure is going to be.
And we're working on those procedures right now. So I'm hoping to have a draft off to you shortly as it relates to what that.
I don't understand what you
would look like.
another procedure that I mean, people give us our plans when they apply all the time, and we make sure that it's contained. We go through the whole process.
We have to have an expedited application process. You don't want to just generate the same application. We already have a lot of information, so it's going to be like a 2 or 3 page situation that satisfies the requirement under the order.
There's no other town that's already produced this that we could pick.
Nobody knew.
They're all
because nobody had
scrambling
the
right
vote.
now.
Right. We're all in the same boat right now. We didn't even think ABCC was gonna let this loose. The last we had heard on that topic was they were holding on to this authority, and they were.
Remember we brought it up when we had the 2 state reps and the state senator here, and they said, no, there's no legislation pending. Remember that conversation?
I remember the letter from Barnstable. I remember what we requested.
Yeah.
I think there are towns that have waived
I think we're going to be in a position to help these businesses.
Great.
We're going to have to scramble just like everybody else, but I think we can do it. We're not going to do it with our regular meeting schedule. If we get an onslaught of applications, we're going to have to set some evenings aside and just go through a whole bunch of them. It shouldn't be, too bad. And if so, as long as we have 3, we can do it.
Is there some way that we can waive the health department visit? No, listen to me. As a precondition, and say, all right, but the health department inspection is required, but not as a precondition. You need to talk about one person going out.
Oh, sure. You could license them, and then they'll have to go to the Board of Health to get whatever approval they need. Sure. You don't have to wait until
my point is this whole process will move as slowly as the single resource that's available. And if we have one person in the health department, guess what? It'll take 3 months to get an application through. We need to find ways to expedite the process. I agree with Tracy. We need to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, but again, under the governor's order, we have to have a written procedural roadmap, so to speak, for people to follow. And then we have to have the applications coming in from the businesses. And then we have to set up who's going to take care of the zoning issues, which, in my opinion, the logical person would be the building commissioner. Again, assuming he's got the staff and the manpower, because if there's a ton of businesses that apply for this relief, there's going to be a lot of pressure on whomever has to do inspections or grant relief.
My point is, with regard to inspections, whether it's the building commissioner or the health department, that we look at the applications, approve the applications, and not make it a pre-requirement that those inspections occur, but rather say that those inspections will occur over some period of time, whenever the inspectors can get out there, but not backlog the entire process behind 1 or 2 individuals in the town office.
I don't know. I mean, we could certainly talk to town council about that.
I think particularly with tent service, if somebody's looking to put up a tent, the state building code has specific requirements for the building commissioner to inspect the tent for public safety. I'd be very careful to tread down a road where we're stepping on sanitation codes or building codes.
You remind me of something else. The eating areas have to be covered either with an umbrella or a canopy or some type of covering to protect people from the elements. So yeah, so back to Dan's point, there is going to have to be some kind of inspection for that. But in any event, we'll do our level best to do our part, and we'll raise those questions with town council, Norm, to see if there's any further streamlining that can be available. I'm certainly in favor of doing this as expeditiously as possible. prolonged delay is going to defeat the very need that's out there.
We need to be ready to act,
Yes,
Right.
and we need to be able to act quick. And I
yes.
don't want to be the last town, and our businesses are dying out there. And here we are, we're talking about all the stuff that needs to be developed. Well, let's get it done. If it was in the private sector, I'll tell you what, it'd be done in a day's time, because that's how important it is. It's a make or break, a livelihood for these people. And, you know, I'm hearing a lot of, you know, yeah, it's great. They removed red tape, but did they? Not from this conversation.
Oh, they did. If you, I mean, you look at the normal licensing, there's no way you'd probably get a license approved for a couple of months under the old requirements with notice and everything. Publication, all that's waived. ABCC approval, that's not required. This is nothing like it used to be, so.
Well, I'm sure as soon as they know the rules, they will put their applications and their information in within a day's time, so.
Well, I'm already gathering dialogue and have been for the last, even before this broke, with Tom Murphy from the Yarmouth Restaurant Association and from the Chamber of Commerce. They're all over this.
Good, we should be too.
So we'll go forward and we should have everything in place by our next meeting, right, Dan?
You're gonna have the plan by your next meeting, that's correct.
Okay. And if we have to have emergency meetings, we can do it. Annual town election update. You already talked about that.
Yep, so we're, the
We're
clerk's.
on hold till next meeting in terms of what facility and the cost of the tent and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I need to know that ASAP. I'd like to have a vote on what you want to do with that tonight. Because we got to start the logistical planning on
You'd
it.
like a vote on what option we'd like to do, Mattakese, DY, or a tent?
A tent or something outside.
Even though we don't know the cost of it?
Well, it's gonna be expensive. That the tent option is the most expensive option, probably north of $5,000 or $6,000, I would imagine. I just don't have the hard numbers right now.
I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts on what? you
I
think?
know Eric's not in favor of an outdoor meeting, but I feel like as far as comfort level for our population, being outside is probably more comfortable. I think we'd get a better attendance, but
What do you think, Norm?
You know, I'm, yeah, everybody love to be outdoors, except if the weather is crappy.
Yeah.
And then it'll be a disaster. I don't know where all the parking and all that sort of thing will go at. I'm just not that familiar with how it would be set up outdoors. You know, I'm more confident of the indoor facilities we have
Okay.
and the capabilities that we have.
Would you be leaning toward Mattakese or the high school?
I'd be leaning toward Mattakese.
Okay.
Yeah.
so the question is, how would we handle when we get to max capacity though? Is it just first come, first serve when we get
I
to?
was told by council that anybody that's a registered voter has to be allowed entry. So you run into that serious problem that if you exceeded your capacity, you know, obviously you're not supposed to overload a building either, you know. I mean, under ideal circumstances, that facility at Mattakese could hold almost 1,000 people, but we're just not in that circumstance right now. Maybe we could squeeze out up to 300 if a lot of couples came, which likely is going to be the case because they can sit next to each other.
Is there a possibility at Mattakese that we could wire the cafeteria with a audio?
We could do some additional, like, you know, use as much of that big facility as possible and have some spillover space in the cafeteria. We could look at that. That's, I mean, personally, I think when you weigh all the things in front of us on that, doing that, only having to do like one remote location setup is the easiest for us logistically, you know.
Mark?
I mean, my preference is whatever works. I'm fine with outdoors. I'm fine with indoors. I think it's a question of the best option. The schools themselves, they're vacant more or less. So whatever needs to be done to make them ready and to find additional rooms, that's all workable. And so it's a question of just the logistics and the cost. I think going outdoors, a number of other towns are doing that. I know Bourne's moving in that direction. I've been reading other reports of other towns doing that. So I think there's a real upside to doing that. So I'm in favor of whatever works and works the best.
Yeah.
So
Eric?
if it's outdoors, that's fine. Indoors is fine. We just got to get it done.
Eric?
Atticus, let people sit wherever they want.
6-inch spacing,
I'm sorry?
as long as you're 6 inches apart.
I mean, are we gonna sit on the stage 6 feet apart?
Good question.
You know, wear your mask?
No, I'm not gonna wear my mask. This is all so stupid. You don't feel comfortable? Try to stay 6 feet away. If you're going out to dinner with your neighbor, or if you're getting together with people and you feel comfortable sitting next to them, sit next to them. Take care of yourself.
All right, Dan, you need a decision tonight on this, right?
Yeah, so basically, based on the conversation before, I need a time and a location.
All right, let's see if we can. I think we're gonna have to deal with a location first. I think the time will be less difficult. I personally, I like the outdoor thing. I've been to a couple of tent meetings. However, there was no social distancing back in the day. I'm concerned about the weather, if you had bad weather, if it rained or something like that. So for that reason, I prefer to do it indoors. And I think Mattakese would be our best option. And what I would do is I would have an audio visual hookup into the cafeteria in case we do have too many people in the auditorium and the gym. And I think we would be safe doing that. I don't think we'd have more people than we could accommodate. But somebody want to make a motion one way or the other?
That's fine with me. I'll make the motion. The one thing about Mattakese I like is the consistency. People go to the same spot all the time. I understand the weather thing. You can't particularly have a rain date, so I don't know how you work that. But I do think we'd be able to have, or I think we'd have a better turnout. But I understand the need for Mattakese, and if we can have remote areas and it can logistically be done, I'm fine with that. That was a
I
motion.
guess that's a motion. If that's a motion, I'll second it.
Okay. We have a motion in a second. Any further discussion? Tracy,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
I vote aye as well. So we're gonna do it at Mattakese, and we're gonna get a backup system with audio and visual of the meeting for the cafeteria. Okay, what about the time? What do you guys want to do with the time?
Part of the reason that I suggested moving it up is it usually takes at least 20 minutes before it moves forward.
Right.
With introductions and et cetera, and it seems to me that we ought to be able to take some items and deal with them early on. That maybe we deal with some of the issues that are on the articles that are supposed to be considered but are going to be deferred, and just simply at the beginning of the meeting, take those out of order and just say, we're going to defer those to the future. And it gives some time before we get to the budget and to some of the financial issues that are really central to the meeting.
Good idea.
So, you know, I guess my gut tells me that 6 o'clock would be more workable. And
I would agree
would
with
not,
that. 6 o'clock. I'm
So,
with you, Norm. I move, I'll just make the motion. Let's go to start it at 6.
second,
All right. Any further discussion? Eric,
Aye.
Mark,
Aye.
Tracy,
aye.
Norm,
aye.
I vote aye as well. That's unanimous. 6 o'clock, Dan.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Restaurant and retail business openings. Well, we kind of talked a lot about that. You have anything further on that, Dan?
I don't.
By the way, this thing just broke today with the governor, so it's, my understanding is that, I failed to mention in talking to Jay, he said that some people think the governor's exceeded his authority, on this, and that there could be some pushback. So he thinks the legislature is gonna file a backup bill so that if anyone takes any legal action, then they can rely on the legislation. So this stuff is all uncharted territory, and everybody's going to be scrambling to put it into effect, and we hope we don't get any kind of litigation that'll slow it down. And we hope that the legislature does provide that backup legislation just in case. So, all right, board, go ahead.
Position to back up the governor's orders?
Yeah, on this, all this licensing and waiver of zoning and all.
Oh, okay. You mean to help?
Well, the legislature hopefully will help, but there are those, and I don't know who that group is, that think that the governor, only the legislature has the authority to do what the governor did. And there could be a potential challenge to his authority. And so town council said that hopefully he has heard that the legislature may file a bill to cover the same territory. And in that way, if somebody ever did challenge the governor's authority, then the legislation would kick in and we'd be able to do the same thing we could do under the legislation that we could do under the governor's order. But we'll see. I mean, this is, this is a story that changes from day to day. So we'll keep everybody advised. Committee actions.
Mr. Chairman, we have 2 terms expiring on the Yarmouth Conservation Commission. So I am recommending to the board that we vote to reappoint Tom Durkin and Patricia Mulhern as members to the Town of Yarmouth Conservation Commission. The appointments would be for 3 years, running through June 2023.
Okay, do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll take a vote. Tracy,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Norm,
Abstain.
Mark,
Aye.
I vote aye. So that passes by a vote of 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Very good. Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Projected 2020 agenda items.
Well, I think in light of what we discussed tonight, what we'll do is as we get applications in, we'll just have to start scheduling some dates through to probably right up through to town meeting or so,
Okay.
I just don't know what that looks like right now.
No, I understand that. All right, so let's go to individual items. Does anyone have anything? Tracy?
No, I too want to thank Maureen Tui Bedford for the ceremony that was so eloquently done. Many towns canceled theirs, and I found that her ingenuity and creativity to be able to honor our fallen in a way that she did, and not having to cancel it was especially wonderful. So I just want to thank her, and I know we've thanked her formally in the past. I think we should again.
Okay. Before I go to anyone else, I was at that ceremony as well, and I concur with Tracy's remarks. Maureen's not one you can say no to or tell her what she can't do, despite all of the limitations. She did a fabulous job, and showed everyone that Yarmouth doesn't forget its fallen, no matter what the circumstances are. I think that was a clear message. So, and so that was great. It really was. And I think we should send her a letter of thanks. I concur with that 100%. Mark.
I have nothing to add.
Norm. Do you have anything?
I have a couple things. First of all, I don't think I could go without saying something about what's been happening across the country in the last three nights, I think, and the whole reaction to the horrible events around the deaths that occurred in Minnesota. And I struggle thinking about solutions because what we're hearing is that we need solutions, and I think we as a society and in this country need to think about how we solve this. Not just we're going to be better at race relations, and we need to improve the economic status. We need to really come up with a more definitive solution to this issue. I was thinking this morning about over this country's history, we've integrated many nationalities into our society that were ridiculed to begin with when they arrived en masse. You can talk about Irish immigrants, Italian immigrants. You can go on and on about so many different elements or different areas from in the world where people came into the United States. And those individuals and those segments of our society have been integrated into this country, economically and socially. And that has not occurred with regard to the Black race generally in this country. And we've got to get to the bottom of it. And we've got to find solutions that are long lasting. And, rhetoric won't do it. And more BS is just not going to help the situation. And we really need to dedicate resources across the country in every state. I don't think we're immune to it here in Massachusetts. And I think every state has to dedicate resources to a fast solution, not a multi-generational solution, a fast solution to this issue. And I think we've all got to contribute in some way to that. The second thing I wanted to talk about is with regard to some of the movement forward on reopening our businesses and reopening our town. And I hope that we will be careful about not dedicating town resources, police officers, or other enforcement officials going out and trying to enforce regulations which just run counter to what our society needs to do at this point. You know, we're in a war, and what happens in a war? You fight your adversary not only to eliminate their fighting forces, but to eliminate their economic power to regenerate their fighting forces. What has happened here in this country is we have given up our economic power to this adversary. We've ceded our economic power. And we have done so much damage to this country economically to be able to afford to not only defeat this plague, but to do other things that our society really needs. And you know, I hope we have learned a major lesson from this, that if we give up our economic power, we won't be able to do the things that we really want to be able to do. We've got to keep our economic power, keep our peoples in their jobs and working, and at the same time address the health issues. They can't be single-minded approaches. That just doesn't work. I hope locally we don't dedicate any resources to going out and I call it harassing. And I don't mean that in the worst sense of the word, but harassing any of our businesses or any of our citizens with regard to, oh, you're 3 feet away from so-and-so, geez, get your mask on. That sort of baloney. We need to free up our society. So I've said my piece.
Thank you. Mark?
I don't have anything.
You're good. Eric?
Yeah.
I won't try to follow the Gettysburg Address there.
Okay. I won't either. I would like to thank Kyle for the excellent job that he's done tonight. He's only lost me twice. But we're gonna blame that on the computer. Rich was doing it before and did a great job, and so is Kyle, and I'm very appreciative of both of their efforts. Okay, Dan, do you have any updates?
Yeah, no updates. There's just one item on the consent agenda. It's a donation. If you could pass that, that'd be great.
Okay. Let me see where that is.
It's a donation of $1,000 to the fire department from the Keeler family.
Okay, we have a motion on the to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Eric,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
I vote aye as well. That passes unanimously. What about water resources planning, Dan?
I don't have anything specific on that topic at this time.
Okay. We didn't do an agenda review. Can we quickly look at that? So next week we have Papa Gino's coming in for a public hearing and Yarmouth Wine and Spirits, a fundraising special event. possible award of scholarships. I don't know how we're gonna do that. I know normally we do that, and it's a nice event.
I think we can do that remotely.
Okay, that would be good. Do you have anything else? Does anybody, we're gonna talk about licensing procedures.
Right, that'll be on there. That just popped up. There'll be the usual updates as we have them on.
Licensing procedures and any further updates on that subject of licensing outdoor facilities, any new developments that might happen.
Right.
I'd like to know where we're at with the scale house at the landfill.
It's scheduled now and it's been open.
Okay,
It might have been one day in the last couple of weeks where they didn't make it on the Sunday, but it's, I've got extra overtime hours staff in it, so it's
Is
open.
there anything that any of the other selectmen would like to see come up on that June 9th agenda that we might not have
so
in
we
mind?
have on there our plan for the business process, the
Yeah.
plan for the ABCC and
Yeah,
restaurant opening. Okay.
yeah. We're gonna do that. Okay, if nobody has anything else on that, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, Eric,
Aye.
Norm,
Aye.
Mark.
Aye.
Tracy.
Aye.
I vote aye as well.